A girl whispers 4 words to a truck driver. Immediately, he calls the police. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're tuning in from. Now sit back and let's begin the journey. The wind howled outside the small roadside diner, its windows fogged with the warmth inside as the world beyond froze under a thick blanket of snow. The flickering neon sign outside struggled to stay lit, casting broken beams of red across the parking lot. Cars and trucks sat idle under piles of fresh snow, their windshields iced over as the relentless blizzard raged on. Inside, the diner was an island of warmth. The smell of coffee, bacon grease, and fried potatoes hung in the air. A jukebox sat in the corner, its last selection long forgotten, while the hum of the overhead lights filled the empty spaces between conversations. Jeff Reynolds, a long-haul trucker with 20 years of highway stories under his belt, sat at the counter nursing a steaming mug of black coffee. His thick jacket lay across the stool next to him, snow melting from its seams. The lines around his eyes, carved by years of staring at the endless white lines on the asphalt, deepened as he rubbed his tired face. The storm had caught him off guard, forcing him to pull over at this little spot he'd never noticed before. He wasn't alone, though the diner was nearly empty. A young waitress, maybe in her late 20s, wiped down tables while humming softly to herself. In the far corner sat a man in his late 40s, wearing a bulky parka that had seen better days. His presence wasn't remarkable, except for the fact that he wasn't alone. Sitting across from him was a girl, no older than 10, with a pink knit hat covering her head and oversized boots dangling from the chair. Her eyes, dark and cautious, barely lifted from her plate. The man spoke to her quietly, but she didn't respond. Jeff didn't pay much attention at first. He was more focused on waiting out the storm and planning his route for the morning. But something felt off. It wasn't just the eerie quiet of the diner or the way the snow slammed against the windows like a warning. It was the girl. She hadn't spoken once since he arrived, and her posture was stiff, as if her body were bracing for something. "Another coffee, hun?" the waitress asked, startling him. "Yeah, thanks," Jeff replied, pushing his mug forward. As she poured, his gaze drifted back to the girl. The man leaned in closer to her, whispering something, and the girl's fingers tightened around her fork. She didn't eat, didn't even look at her plate. Jeff cleared his throat and adjusted his trucker cap. Maybe it wasn't his business. Maybe he was just overtired. But when the man suddenly grabbed the girl's wrist and muttered something under his breath, Jeff's instincts kicked in. He'd seen that kind of tension before, at rest stops, truck stations, and diners just like this one. There were men who controlled the world with just a grip. And this man had that same energy. Before he could think twice, the girl slid off her seat and walked toward the restroom. As she passed Jeff's stool, she slowed down just enough to glance at him. Her lips trembled as she whispered, barely audible over the hum of the diner. "He's not my dad." Jeff's hand froze on his coffee mug. He blinked, unsure if he'd heard her correctly. He turned, but the girl was already disappearing around the corner toward the restroom. His heart pounded in his chest as he replayed those words over and over. "He's not my dad." The waitress placed the coffee pot back on the warmer. Jeff looked at her, then back at the corner booth. The man hadn't noticed the girl's absence yet. He was scrolling through his phone, occasionally glancing toward the restroom. Jeff's breath hitched. He couldn't just sit there. Sliding off the stool, he reached for his jacket and made his way toward the payphone by the door. His fingers trembled slightly as he lifted the receiver and dialed 911. Outside, the wind howled like a wounded animal, shaking the building's thin walls. 911, what's your emergency? Jeff took a deep breath, glancing over his shoulder to make sure the man wasn't watching. I'm at the Cedar Hill Diner off Route 12. There's a little girl here, and she just told me the man she's with isn't her father. The dispatcher's voice remained calm, but he could hear the urgency beneath it. Can you describe the man? Yeah, mid to late 40s, brown hair, wearing a green parka. He's sitting in the booth near the back, watching the restroom. The girl's about 10, wearing a pink hat. I think something's wrong. Stay on the line with me, sir. Is the man acting suspicious? Jeff exhaled through his nose. He's too calm, like he's waiting for something. The way he grabbed her wrist, it wasn't right. How long before you can send someone? There was a pause. We have units on the way, but the roads are bad. The storm's making it difficult. Can you stay there and keep an eye on them without drawing attention? Jeff nodded, though the dispatcher couldn't see him. Yeah, I'll do what I can. He hung up and returned to the counter, keeping his movements casual. His gaze flicked toward the restroom. The girl hadn't come out yet. He could feel the sweat gathering under his shirt despite the cold draft from the door. He needed to think fast. Just then, the man in the green parka stood up, tossing a few bills on the table. Jeff's breath hitched. The man glanced toward the restroom, hesitated, and then started walking toward the door. Panic gripped Jeff's chest like a vice. If that man left now, he'd take the girl with him, and there'd be nothing Jeff could do until it was too late. The door to the restroom creaked open. The girl stepped out, her eyes wide with fear as she spotted the man waiting for her. She looked at Jeff, her gaze begging for help. Jeff stood. "Hey, buddy," he called out, forcing a smile as he walked toward the man. "You got a minute?" The man stopped, his eyes narrowing. "Do I know you?" "No, but I'm a trucker and I couldn't help but notice your jacket. I've been looking for one like that for winter driving." "Mind telling me where you got it?" The man's gaze flickered with suspicion. His hand hovered near the girl's shoulder, protective and threatening all at once. "We're in a hurry," he said coldly. Jeff stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I don't think you are." His gaze met the girl's for a brief moment before locking eyes with the man. The tension snapped like a live wire. "Who the hell are you?" the man growled, his grip tightening on the girl. Before Jeff could respond, the sound of sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder as they approached. The man's head whipped toward the window, his expression darkening. "Let her go," Jeff said firmly. The man's knuckles whitened, but before he could react, the girl yanked her arm free and ran behind Jeff. The man lunged, but Jeff blocked him, his arms braced like steel. "Get back," Jeff barked. The door burst open and 2 officers entered, snow swirling around them as the wind howled through the opening. The man froze, his face contorting with rage as they grabbed his arms and pulled him back. The girl sobbed, clinging to Jeff's leg as the officers cuffed the man and dragged him outside into the blizzard. The air inside the diner was thick with tension, the only sound being the girl's quiet cries. Jeff knelt down, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now," he whispered. But as he looked into her tear-streaked face, he realized this wasn't over, not even close. The snow outside had turned into a wall of white, swirling like a living thing as the wind howled through the cracks of the old diner. The door slammed shut behind the officers, muffling the chaos outside. For a brief moment, everything fell silent inside, except for the quiet, uneven breaths of the little girl clinging to Jeff's leg. She wouldn't let go. Jeff gently knelt down, his weathered hands resting lightly on her small shoulders. She was trembling, her body tense as if one wrong move would send her running. Her face was pale, her wide brown eyes darting between the door and the empty booth where she had been sitting just moments ago. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Jeff asked softly. His voice was low and warm, the same tone he had used when calming his niece down after her nightmares. The girl didn't answer. Her lips pressed into a tight line and she gripped the hem of her pink sweater with trembling fingers. The oversized sleeves swallowed her hands. "It's okay," Jeff continued, keeping his voice steady. "You're safe now. No one's going to hurt you." He tried to smile, but it felt forced. Awkward. The waitress, who had been standing frozen near the counter, suddenly rushed over. Her sneakers squeaked against the linoleum floor as she crouched next to Jeff. "Oh my God, is she okay? Should I call someone else? Do you think?" Jeff held up a hand, silencing her gently. "She's scared. Let's give her a minute." The waitress nodded, biting her lip. She wrung her hands nervously before stepping back, her gaze flicking toward the door as if expecting the man to come charging back through it. Outside, the flashing red and blue lights illuminated the snow-covered lot. Jeff could barely make out the silhouette of the officers shoving the man into the back of the patrol car. The storm made everything hazy, like the world itself was trying to swallow up the chaos and bury it under the snow. The girl's breathing slowed, but her grip on Jeff didn't loosen. He wasn't sure if she trusted him or if he was just the closest thing she could hold on to. Either way, he wasn't going to push her. One of the officers, a woman in her early 40s with a no-nonsense demeanor and sharp eyes, entered the diner, shaking the snow off her jacket. Her badge glimmered briefly under the diner's flickering fluorescent lights. She approached Jeff and the girl, her boots leaving wet footprints behind her. "Sir," she said, addressing Jeff, "I'm Officer Laura Kane. We've detained the man outside. What's going on here?" Jeff exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "The girl came up to me and said he wasn't her dad. She looked terrified and, well, I've been on the road long enough to know when something's not right." He glanced down at the girl, who was still clinging to him. "I called you guys as soon as I could." Kane crouched, resting her hands on her knees as she tried to make eye contact with the girl. "Hey there," she said gently. "Can you tell me your name?" The girl's gaze flicked to Kane, then back to Jeff. Her little body trembled as she clutched his sleeve. "It's okay," Jeff murmured. "She's here to help, just like me." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the girl whispered, "Lily." Kane smiled softly. "Hi, Lily. That's a beautiful name." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small packet of tissues, offering one to the girl. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" "Are you hurt?" Lily hesitated before shaking her head. She wiped her nose with the tissue but didn't say anything else. Kane nodded, her smile never wavering. "That's okay. You don't have to talk if you don't want to, but I promise, you're safe now." She stood, her face shifting into a more serious expression as she turned to Jeff. "We're going to need to ask her more questions back at the station, but we'll take it slow. She's obviously been through something." Jeff's jaw tightened. He had seen fear like this before, during his time driving cross-country and stopping at truck stops late at night. He'd heard the stories, met the girls who had escaped terrible situations only to be found wandering along the highway with nothing but the clothes on their backs. "What about him?" Jeff asked, gesturing toward the window where the flashing light still illuminated the snow. Kane's expression darkened. "He's not saying much. Claimed the girl was his niece and that they were traveling together because her mother was sick." She crossed her arms. "But he didn't have any identification on him. And when we ran the plates on his car, they came back stolen." Jeff felt a surge of anger rise in his chest. "I knew it," he muttered. "There was something about him." Kane nodded. "We'll bring him in for questioning, but until Lily talks, we don't have much to go on. Do you mind coming with us to the station? Your statement could be helpful." Jeff looked down at Lily. Her fingers had relaxed slightly, but she still clung to him like he was her lifeline. He couldn't just leave her. "I'll come," he said, "but only if she's okay with it." Kane knelt again, speaking softly. "Lily, would you like Mr. Jeff to come with us? He can ride in the car with you if you want." Lily nodded, her grip tightening on Jeff's hand. "All right," Kane said, standing up again. "Let's get out of here before the storm gets worse." The police car was warm, the heat blasting through the vents as they drove through the snow-covered streets. Lily sat between Jeff and Kane in the back seat, her head resting lightly against Jeff's arm. She hadn't spoken a word since leaving the diner, and Jeff didn't push her. He could feel the weight of her exhaustion pressing against him. The station wasn't far, but the drive felt long. Outside, the world was a blur of white, with streetlights barely visible through the thick snowfall. Jeff stared out the window, his mind racing. Who was that man? And why did Lily look like she hadn't slept in days? When they finally pulled into the station's parking lot, the wind howled like a warning, whipping snow across the windshield. Jeff helped Lily out of the car, her small hand still clinging to his. Inside, the station was bright and sterile, the smell of coffee and disinfectant filling the air. Kane led them to a small private room with a couch and a table. "You can wait here," she said. "I'll be back in a few minutes." Jeff sat down on the couch, and Lily immediately curled up next to him, her head resting against his chest. He wrapped an arm around her, his protective instincts kicking in. "It's going to be okay," he whispered, more to himself than to her. But the truth was he wasn't sure. Something about this felt bigger than just a man with a stolen car. As the door closed behind Kane, Jeff stared at the empty room, the sound of the wind rattling the windows. Whatever storm they had just escaped at the diner wasn't over yet. It was only just beginning. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, its rhythmic sound filling the small room where Jeff sat with Lily curled up against his side. The warmth of the police station contrasted sharply with the frozen chaos they had left behind at the diner. Snowflakes clung to Jeff's boots, melting into small puddles on the tiled floor. Outside, the wind continued its relentless assault on the building, but in this room, everything was still. Jeff ran his fingers gently through Lily's hair, her soft curls damp with melted snow. She hadn't spoken since they arrived. Her breathing had evened out, but every so often her body would tense, as if she were still trapped in a nightmare. Jeff didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. He just held her, offering what little comfort he could. The door creaked open, and Officer Kane entered carrying 2 steaming cups of hot chocolate. She placed one on the table in front of Jeff and handed the other to Lily, crouching down to meet the girl's eye level. "This one's for you, sweetheart," she said, her voice gentle. "It's got extra marshmallows." Lily stared at the cup for a moment before slowly taking it, her small hands wrapped around it like she was holding the only warmth she had left in the world. She didn't drink it right away, but Jeff noticed the faintest flicker of gratitude in her eyes. Kane stood and sat across from them, pulling a notebook from her pocket and clicking her pen. "Jeff," she said softly, "I know you've already told me some of what happened, but I need to get it on record. Can you walk me through what you saw back at the diner?" Jeff nodded, taking a deep breath. "When I walked in, they were sitting in the corner booth. I didn't think much of it at first, just a man and a girl having dinner. But she wasn't eating. She looked scared, like she didn't belong there. The guy, something about him didn't sit right with me. He kept looking around the diner like he was waiting for something or someone. When she came up to me and whispered that he wasn't her dad, I knew I couldn't ignore it." Kane scribbled notes quickly, her brow furrowed. "Did he ever threaten her directly?" "Not that I saw," Jeff admitted. "But he grabbed her wrist at one point. It wasn't rough, but it wasn't gentle either. And she flinched, like she'd been through it before." He paused, his eyes drifting down to Lily, who was quietly sipping her hot chocolate. "You don't need to see someone hit a kid to know they're in trouble. You just know." Kane nodded, her expression thoughtful. "You did the right thing by calling us." Jeff shifted in his seat. "What about him? Has he said anything?" Kane leaned back, tapping her pen against her notebook. "He's sticking to his story, claims he's her uncle and that he's been taking care of her since her mother got sick. But like I said earlier, the car he was driving is stolen, and he didn't have any identification on him." She sighed. "We'll run his fingerprints and see what comes up. But until Lily talks, it's hard to build a solid case." Jeff felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He didn't know much about the law, but he knew enough to understand that without Lily's testimony, the man could walk out of here and take her with him. The thought made his blood boil. "She's terrified of him," Jeff said firmly. "You saw it yourself. That should be enough to keep him locked up." Kane gave him a sympathetic look. "Believe me, we're not letting him go anytime soon, but if we're going to protect her permanently, we need more." She hesitated, glancing at Lily. "Has she told you anything else?" Jeff shook his head. "She's barely said a word since the diner." Kane closed her notebook and leaned forward, her elbows resting on her knees. "Do you mind if I try talking to her alone for a bit? Sometimes kids are more willing to open up when they're not around strangers." Jeff hesitated. Lily's fingers were still clutching his sleeve, and he could feel the slight tremble in her hand. She trusted him, maybe not completely, but enough to see him as a safe place. Letting her go now felt wrong, like abandoning her in the middle of a storm. "I'll be right outside," Kane promised. "If she needs you, we'll bring you back in." He looked down at Lily, who was staring into her cup of hot chocolate as if it held answers to questions she wasn't ready to ask. "Lily," he said softly, The officer just wants to talk to you for a few minutes. I'll be right outside the door, okay?" Her eyes flicked up to meet his, wide and uncertain. After a moment, she nodded reluctantly, releasing her grip on his sleeve. Jeff stood, his boots scraping against the floor as he made his way to the door. Before stepping out, he turned back and gave her a reassuring smile. "You're doing great, kid." The door clicked shut behind him, and he leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. His mind raced through worst-case scenarios. What if she didn't say anything? What if the man somehow found a way to get to her? What if... "Mr. Jeff?" The soft voice startled him, and he turned to see a young officer standing nearby. "Yeah?" "We're holding the guy in one of the interrogation rooms," the officer said. "Detective Kane thought you might want to watch." Jeff hesitated, glancing back at the door to the room where Lily was talking with Kane. Part of him wanted to stay right there, just in case she needed him. But the other part, the one fueled by anger and determination, wanted to see the man who had put that fear in her eyes. "Yeah," Jeff said, his voice steady. "Take me to him." The interrogation room was small and dimly lit, with a table in the center and a one-way mirror on the wall. Jeff stood behind the glass, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, as he watched the man in the green parka sit across from a detective. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes flicked nervously around the room, betraying his cool exterior. The detective leaned forward, tapping a file on the table. "We ran your prints," he said. "Turns out this isn't your first run-in with the law." The man smirked, leaning back in his chair. "That's right, I've been in trouble before, but you won't find anything about me hurting a kid." Jeff clenched his fists. He could feel the tension in the room, thick like the air before a storm. "What about Lily?" the detective pressed. "Why was she scared of you? Why did she tell someone you weren't her dad?" The man shrugged. "Kids get scared. They don't understand everything. Her mom's been sick for a while, and I'm the only one who's been there for her. She's probably confused, doesn't know who to trust." Jeff's jaw tightened. The man's casual tone, the way he twisted the truth, it made his skin crawl. He had met men like this before, men who lied with a smile and made you question your own instincts. The detective leaned back, tapping the file again. "If that's the case, why was the car stolen?" The man's smirk faltered. "That's what I thought," the detective said. "You better start telling the truth, because the longer you lie, the worse it's going to get for you." Jeff's pulse pounded in his ears. He wanted to burst through the door, grab the man by the collar, and demand answers. But he knew that wouldn't help Lily. He needed to stay calm. Suddenly, the door to the viewing room opened, and Kane stepped inside. "Jeff," she said softly, "you need to come back. Lily's ready to talk." Jeff took one last look at the man in the interrogation room. His smirk had returned. But this time it felt forced. The walls were closing in on him, and he knew it. Jeff turned away and followed Kane down the hall, his mind racing. Whatever Lily had to say, he knew it would be important. But he wasn't prepared for just how much her next words would change everything. The small room was warm and quiet, the hum of the heating vent filling the space as Jeff stepped inside. Lily sat on the couch, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked smaller than she had before, like she was trying to make herself invisible. Her half-empty cup of hot chocolate sat on the table, the marshmallows now melted into a sugary swirl. Jeff's heart ached just looking at her. He had no idea how long she'd been living in fear or what this man had put her through. But he could see the weight of it in her eyes. When she glanced up at him, there was a flicker of relief, like she'd been waiting for him to come back. He smiled softly and sat down next to her. "I told you I'd be right outside." She nodded but didn't say anything. Her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her sweater, twisting the fabric into tight little knots. Officer Kane pulled up a chair across from them, her notebook balanced on her knee. She had taken off her heavy jacket, and her badge now rested visibly on her belt, a quiet reminder of authority and safety. But her tone was gentle, like someone talking to a child at bedtime. "Lily," Kane said softly, "thank you for being so brave." I know it's hard to talk about scary things, but you're doing a really good job. We're just here to listen, okay? Lily nodded again. Her lips pressed together. She looked at Jeff, her silent plea clear. Stay with me. He gave her a reassuring nod and rested his hand lightly on her shoulder. You don't have to rush, kid. Take your time. For a moment, it seemed like she wouldn't speak, but then, with a shaky breath, she whispered, His name isn't Tom. He told me to call him that, but it's not his name. Kane leaned forward slightly, her pen hovering over the page. Do you know what his real name is? Lily shook her head. He never said, but he's not my uncle. He lied about that too. Jeff felt his chest tighten. He had known this man was trouble. But hearing Lily confirm it made the danger feel even more real. Where did you meet him, Lily? Kane asked gently. Lily's fingers stilled and her gaze dropped to her lap. At the playground, I was waiting for my mom. Her voice wavered and she sniffled quietly. She was supposed to pick me up, but she didn't come. Jeff's throat tightened. He could see where this was going, but he didn't interrupt. I was cold, Lily continued. He came up to me and said he knew my mom. He said she was in trouble and needed my help. He told me to get in his car. Kane's pen scratched across the page. But her expression remained calm, steady. How long have you been with him? Lily's brow furrowed as she thought. A few days, maybe more. I don't know. We kept driving and we stopped at different places. He made me sleep in the car sometimes. Her voice grew softer, almost a whisper. He said if I tried to run, he'd find me. He said no one would believe me. Jeff felt a surge of anger boil inside him, but he forced himself to stay calm for her sake. His hand gently squeezed her shoulder. That's not true, Lily. You did the right thing telling us. We believe you. She looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with tears. He was going to take me somewhere far away. I heard him talking on the phone when he thought I was asleep. He said they were waiting for us. Jeff exchanged a glance with Kane, his heart pounding. They? He asked carefully. Who's they? I don't know, Lily said, her voice breaking. But he said they'd pay him if he got me there. The words hit Jeff like a punch to the gut. He didn't need to hear anything else to know what that meant. Human trafficking. He'd heard the stories from other truckers, how kids disappeared off the streets, taken by people who sold them like property. Kane closed her notebook, her lips pressed into a grim line. Lily, do you know where he was planning to take you? Lily shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. No, but he had a map. It was in the car. Jeff stood abruptly. We have to check that car. Kane nodded, already on her feet. I'll have the team search it top to bottom. She knelt down in front of Lily, brushing a tear off the girl's cheek. You've been so brave, Lily. We're going to find out where he was taking you, and we're going to make sure he never hurts you or anyone else again. Lily sniffled, wiping her nose on her sleeve. Is my mom okay? Kane hesitated, exchanging another glance with Jeff. It was a question they couldn't answer yet, and the uncertainty was like a knife twisting in Jeff's chest. We're going to find out, Kane said gently. I promise. Back in the hallway, Jeff paced back and forth, his boots echoing against the tile floor. His mind raced, each thought more unsettling than the last. What if they couldn't find Lily's mother? What if this man had been part of something bigger, and they were already too late? Kane returned, her expression as tense as his. They found the map, she said. It was folded under the seat just like Lily said. Jeff stopped pacing. Did it show where he was taking her? Kane nodded. There's a location circled about 2 hours north of here, an abandoned warehouse near the state line. We're coordinating with state police to raid it, but the storm's making it complicated. We'll get there, though. Jeff clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. I want to go with you. Kane hesitated. Jeff, this is police business. You've done more than enough already. Not for her, I haven't, he said firmly. If there's even a chance that her mom's there, or that someone else needs help, I'm going. You can arrest me afterward if you want, but I'm not sitting here waiting for a phone call. Kane studied him for a moment, then nodded. Get your coat. We leave in 5 minutes. The police convoy moved slowly through the snow-covered roads, the flashing lights of the lead cruiser illuminating the swirling white around them. Jeff sat in the passenger seat of Kane's car, his hands gripping his knees as he stared out at the storm. The warehouse loomed ahead, a hulking shadow against the snow-covered landscape. The convoy came to a stop, and the officers quickly fanned out, their boots crunching in the snow as they approached the building. Jeff followed close behind Kane, his breath fogging the air as the bitter cold bit at his skin. The wind howled around them, but Jeff's focus was razor-sharp. He could see the fear in Lily's eyes, the way she had clung to him as if he were her last hope. He wouldn't let her down. Inside the warehouse, the air was thick with the smell of damp wood and rust. The officers moved silently, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Jeff's pulse pounded in his ears as they searched room after room. And then, from somewhere in the distance, he heard it, a faint cry for help. He didn't wait for permission. He ran. The faint cry echoed through the cold, empty warehouse like a ghost's whisper. Jeff sprinted down the dim corridor, his boots thudding against the concrete floor, the sound reverberating off the walls. His breath came in quick bursts, fogging the air in front of him. He didn't think, didn't hesitate. He just ran toward the sound, his heart racing with a mixture of fear and hope. Behind him, Officer Kane called out, "Jeff, wait!" But her voice was distant. He couldn't stop now. The corridor opened into a wide, dimly lit room filled with old crates, rusted machinery, and the smell of mildew. The beams from the officers' flashlights cut through the darkness, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. Jeff strained his ears, listening for the sound again. There, a muffled sob. It was close. Jeff turned sharply, weaving between stacks of wooden pallets until he reached a metal door at the back of the room. It was slightly ajar, the hinges creaking as he pushed it open. Inside, the smell of damp concrete and dust hit him like a wave. His flashlight swept across the room, illuminating rows of shelves filled with discarded tools and broken equipment. Then he saw her. A woman sat huddled in the corner, her arms wrapped protectively around her knees. Her clothes were dirty and torn, and her hair clung to her damp face. She flinched as the light hit her eyes, shielding her face with one hand. "Ma'am," Jeff said gently, stepping closer. "It's okay, I'm here to help." The woman's head lifted slowly, her eyes filled with confusion and fear. Who are you?" Her voice was hoarse, as if she hadn't spoken in days. Jeff knelt down, keeping his voice soft. "My name's Jeff. I'm a truck driver. Your daughter, Lily, she's safe. We found her." The woman's breath hitched and her hand trembled as she reached for him. "Lily? My Lily? She's alive?" Tears streamed down her face, cutting paths through the dirt on her cheeks. "Where is she? Please, I need to see her." "You will," Jeff promised, his throat tightening. "I swear. We'll get you out of here and you'll see her soon." Footsteps approached from behind, and Kane entered the room, her flashlight sweeping over the scene. She immediately radioed for backup. "We found her, requesting medical assistance at the rear storage room." The woman's sobs grew louder, and Jeff gently helped her to her feet. She clung to him, her legs weak and unsteady, but determination kept her upright. "I thought I'd never see her again," she whispered. "I thought she was gone." "You're both safe now," Jeff said, his voice cracking with emotion. "No one's going to hurt you ever again." They helped her outside, where paramedics waited near the convoy of police cars. The snow was still falling, but the wind had calmed, leaving the world quiet and still. The flashing red and blue lights illuminated the scene, casting eerie shadows across the snow-covered ground. Jeff watched as the paramedics wrapped a blanket around the woman and gently helped her into the ambulance. She looked back at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered before the doors closed. Kane stepped up beside him, pulling her jacket tighter around her. "She's going to be okay, Jeff. You saved them both." Jeff shook his head, his gaze fixed on the ambulance as it pulled away. "Not yet, there's still more to do." Kane nodded, understanding the weight of his words. "We've got officers searching the rest of the building. If this place was being used for trafficking, there could be more victims, or evidence that'll help us shut down the whole operation. Jeff exhaled slowly, his breath fogging in the frigid air. Let's find it. The search continued through the night. Room by room, the officers combed through the warehouse, checking every corner and hidden compartment. Jeff stayed close to Kane, his flashlight cutting through the darkness as they moved together. The cold seeped through his boots, numbing his toes, but he didn't care. He wouldn't stop until they had everything they needed. Near the back of the warehouse, they found a small office with a locked door. One of the officers kicked it open, revealing a cluttered space filled with paperwork, maps, and a desk covered in cigarette burns. The air smelled of stale smoke and old coffee. Kane's eyes narrowed as she scanned the room. This could be what we need. Jeff walked over to the desk, his fingers brushing against a stack of documents. Most of it looked like logistical paperwork, receipts, delivery schedules. But something about the maps pinned to the wall caught his attention. They weren't just maps of the local area. They included routes across state lines marked with red X's and arrows. These are transport routes, Jeff said, tracing one of the lines with his finger. They've been moving people across state borders. Kane flipped through a folder on the desk, her expression growing darker with each page. They've been running this operation for months, maybe longer. Fake IDs, stolen vehicles, everything they needed to keep the victims hidden. Jeff clenched his fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface. And they would have taken Lily too if she hadn't spoken up. Kane looked up at him, her gaze steady. But she did, and because of that, we're going to shut this down. Just then, another officer entered the room, holding up a small duffel bag. Found this hidden under one of the pallets. It's full of cash, burner phones, and a ledger. Kane took the bag and opened it, her eyes scanning the handwritten notes inside. This is it, she said. Proof of payments, transaction records, names, locations. Jeff's stomach churned as he thought about how many lives had been ruined by the people behind this operation. But at least now, they had a chance to stop it. Kane placed a hand on his shoulder. We've got what we need. Let's get out of here. Back at the station, the air was warmer, but Jeff's nerves were still on edge. He paced the hallway outside the room where Lily and her mother were finally reunited. Through the small window, he could see them hugging, their tears mixing as they held each other tightly. Jeff leaned against the wall, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. For the first time in hours, he allowed himself to feel something other than fear and anger. Relief washed over him, but it was bittersweet. He knew this wasn't the end. The people who had orchestrated this operation were still out there, and until they were caught, no one was truly safe. Kane approached him, her notebook tucked under her arm. They'll be moving Lily and her mom to a safe house until we've secured the rest of the operation. Jeff nodded, his gaze still fixed on the window. They deserve a chance to heal. They'll get it, Kane said. Thanks to you. Jeff looked down at his hands, the calluses rough against his fingertips. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Kane shook her head. No, Jeff. You didn't just happen to be there. You chose to act. Most people would have ignored it or second-guessed themselves. But you didn't. That's what makes the difference. He swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling deep within him. What happens next? We track down everyone involved, Kane said firmly, and we make sure this never happens again. Jeff nodded, his resolve hardening. He didn't know what the future held. But one thing was certain. He wasn't walking away from this fight. As the first rays of dawn broke through the station windows, Jeff allowed himself a moment to breathe. But deep down, he knew the storm wasn't over yet. The glow of dawn cast a faint orange hue across the horizon, but the warmth of morning did little to thaw the icy weight in Jeff's chest. He stood outside the police station, leaning against the hood of Kane's cruiser, his breath fogging in the cold air. Snowflakes continued to fall lazily, but the wind had calmed, leaving the world eerily silent. He watched as the ambulance carrying Lily and her mother pulled out of the parking lot, its red taillights disappearing into the early morning mist. The image of their tearful embrace replayed in his mind. It was a moment of relief, but it wasn't enough. Not when the people who had put them through hell were still out there. The door to the station creaked open behind him and Kane stepped out, her boots crunching against the snow-covered pavement. She held 2 cups of coffee, one of which she handed to him. "Thanks," Jeff muttered, wrapping his cold hands around the cup. The warmth seeped into his fingers, but it couldn't reach the chill buried deep inside him. "You did good, Jeff," Kane said, taking a sip of her coffee. "They're safe because of you." Jeff exhaled through his nose. "Safe for now, but what about the next girl? What about the others they've taken?" He shook his head, frustration tightening his chest. "I can't just walk away from this." Kane studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. "You don't have to. We're bringing in more units to raid the locations we found in that ledger. This isn't over, but it's a start." "A start," Jeff repeated, his voice hollow. He stared at the steam rising from his cup, his mind racing through the faces of all the kids he'd seen on missing posters at truck stops. How many of them had been caught in webs like this, never to be seen again? "I want to help," he said suddenly, his voice firm. "I don't care how dangerous it is. If you're going after them, I'm coming too." Kane raised an eyebrow. "You're not exactly law enforcement, Jeff." "No," he admitted, "but I know these roads better than most. I know how traffickers move, the places they stop to hide, the truck stops where they pick up new victims. I can be useful." Kane hesitated, tapping her fingers against the side of her coffee cup. "I can't officially bring you along on raids," she said carefully, "but we could use someone with your knowledge to help us identify routes and patterns. You'd be working with us from the outside, but you'd still be involved." Jeff nodded, a spark of determination igniting within him. "I'll take whatever I can get." Inside the station, the atmosphere buzzed with activity. Phones rang, officers shuffled through paperwork, and radio chatter crackled over the speakers. The energy was different now, focused, determined. They had a lead, and no one was wasting time. Kane led Jeff to the briefing room, where a large whiteboard was covered in maps, photographs, and pinned documents. The ledger they had recovered from the warehouse lay open on the table, its pages filled with coded notes and symbols. "Here's what we know so far," Kane said, gesturing to the map. The warehouse was just one of several locations they've been using to hold and transport victims. The routes marked in red indicate highways and back roads they've used to cross state lines. We believe they're part of a larger network, possibly spanning multiple states. Jeff leaned over the table, his eyes scanning the map. His finger traced one of the routes leading north, the same one Lily's captor had planned to take. "This route," he said, tapping the map, "it cuts through a lot of remote areas. There are truck stops, abandoned rest areas, and gas stations along the way. If they're moving people, they'd need places to hide them temporarily." Kane nodded. "That's what we're thinking too. We've already dispatched teams to check some of these locations, but it's going to take time." Jeff frowned, his mind working through possibilities. "What about the phones we found in the duffel bag? Can't you trace their calls or messages?" Kane smirked. "Already on it. Our tech team's working on decrypting the data. If they find anything useful, we'll know." Jeff exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. "What about the guy you arrested? The one pretending to be Lily's uncle? Is he talking yet?" Kane's expression darkened. "He's holding out, claims he's just a middleman and doesn't know anything about the bigger operation. But we're not buying it. We've got him on stolen vehicle charges, so he's not going anywhere for a while." Jeff's fists clenched at his sides. "I want to talk to him." Kane hesitated. "Jeff, I'm not asking for permission," he said, his voice hard. "He used that little girl to line his pockets. I want to know how he sleeps at night." Kane sighed, but after a moment she nodded. "Okay, but keep it under control. If you cross any lines, it could jeopardize the case." The interrogation room was cold, with harsh fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly overhead. The man sat slouched in his chair, his wrists cuffed to the table. His green parka had been removed, leaving him in a wrinkled shirt stained with sweat. He looked up as Jeff entered, his lips curling into a smug smile. "Well, if it isn't the trucker hero," he drawled, leaning back as far as the cuffs would allow. What do you want, a medal? Jeff ignored the jab and pulled out the chair across from him. He sat down, folding his hands on the table. Lily's safe, he said evenly. And her mother's alive. You didn't win. The man's smile faltered for a split second before he recovered. That's cute, but you don't know how this game works, do you? I'm just a piece on the board. Take me off and someone else will take my place. Jeff's jaw tightened. Then tell me who they are. Give me their names, their locations. Help us shut this down. The man chuckled, shaking his head. Even if I wanted to. I don't know. That's the beauty of it. The people at the top keep their distance. They don't get their hands dirty. Jeff leaned forward, his voice low and cold. But you do, and that makes you just as guilty as they are. The man's smile vanished, replaced by a flicker of something darker. Fear. Maybe. Or regret. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. He leaned back again, his eyes narrowing. You're wasting your time. You're not going to find them. Jeff stood, his chair scraping against the floor. He didn't say another word as he left the room, but his resolve burned hotter than ever. Outside, Kane was waiting. Anything useful? No, Jeff admitted. But he's scared. He knows we're closing in. Kane smiled faintly. Good. Let's keep him sweating. That evening, Jeff sat in the driver's seat of his truck, parked at a rest area just outside the city. The snow had stopped, and the stars were visible through the clearing clouds. He stared out at the dark highway ahead, his thoughts drifting back to Lily. His phone buzzed on the dashboard, and he picked it up to see a message from Kane. Got a lead. Warehouse in the next state over. Meeting at dawn. Be there. Jeff smiled grimly, tossing the phone onto the seat next to him. He started the engine. The familiar rumble beneath him, a welcome reminder of the road ahead. This wasn't over yet, but when it was, he'd make sure no other kid had to endure what Lily had. With the highway stretching out before him, Jeff shifted into gear and drove into the night, the weight of his mission heavier than any load he'd ever carried. The early morning air was crisp, biting at Jeff's cheeks as he stepped out of his truck at the designated meeting point. The sun had barely risen, casting a faint golden glow over the snow-covered fields surrounding the old industrial park. His breath hung in the air like smoke, dissipating as quickly as it appeared. The warehouse they were targeting today was larger than the last, an abandoned distribution center with rusted loading docks and broken windows. It sat at the edge of a frozen river, isolated from the nearby town. The perfect hiding place for something, or someone, people wanted kept hidden. Several police SUVs were parked in a semicircle near the entrance, their engines idling to keep the officers inside warm. Jeff recognized Kane's vehicle and made his way over, his boots crunching through the frozen ground. She was standing by the hood, bundled up in a thick coat and wool hat, a radio clipped to her shoulder. You made it, she said, offering him a thermos of coffee. I wasn't sure if you'd show up this early. Jeff took the thermos, grateful for the warmth. I told you, I'm in this all the way. She gave him a small smile, but her eyes were serious. Good. We've got a lot riding on this one. Our tech team cracked the data from the burner phones, and this warehouse came up as a major drop point. We're hoping to find evidence linking it to the rest of the network. Jeff nodded, taking a sip of the strong, bitter coffee. You think they're holding anyone inside? Kane's gaze drifted toward the warehouse, her brow furrowing. It's possible. The place has been off the radar for a while, but recent activity picked up in the last few weeks. If they've been moving people through here, there could be victims, or at the very least records that can lead us to them. A sharp gust of wind blew through the lot, stinging Jeff's face. He pulled his collar up higher and glanced toward the officers gathering near the entrance. They were checking their weapons, testing radios and mapping out their plan of attack. The tension was palpable, a quiet hum that vibrated through the air like an electric current. Kane tapped his arm, pulling him out of his thoughts. Stay close to me once we're inside. Let the team do the heavy lifting, but if you see anything that looks important, routes, names, documents, point it out. Got it, Jeff said, his voice steady. With one final nod, Kane signaled to her team, and the officers moved into formation. The snow crunched beneath their boots as they approached the warehouse, their breath fogging in the frigid air. Jeff followed close behind, his heart pounding with anticipation. The door creaked open, its rusted hinges groaning in protest as the officers slipped inside. The interior was dark and cavernous, the air thick with the smell of mildew and dust. Their flashlights cut through the darkness, illuminating stacks of wooden crates, abandoned forklifts, and rows of shelving covered in cobwebs. Jeff's pulse quickened as he scanned the room, his eyes searching for anything out of place. The warehouse seemed deserted, but he knew better than to trust appearances. Traffickers didn't leave locations like this unguarded without a reason. "Spread out," Kane whispered into her radio. "Check every corner. We're looking for hidden rooms, trapdoors, or anything that could be used to store people or evidence." The team fanned out, their footsteps echoing off the concrete floor. Jeff stuck close to Kane, his flashlight sweeping across the walls. The cold air bit at his fingers, but he barely noticed. His focus was razor sharp, his instincts on high alert. Near the back of the warehouse, they found a small office with a padlocked door. One of the officers stepped forward, bolt cutters in hand, and snapped the lock with a loud clang. The door swung open, revealing a cluttered space filled with filing cabinets, desks, and stacks of old paperwork. Kane let out a low whistle. "Jackpot," she murmured. Jeff followed her inside, his eyes scanning the room. The air was warmer here, and the faint smell of cigarette smoke lingered, suggesting recent activity. Kane immediately went to one of the filing cabinets and began pulling out folders, flipping through them quickly. "Look for anything marked with dates or locations," she said over her shoulder. Jeff nodded, moving to the desk in the corner. It was covered in loose papers, sticky notes, and a coffee-stained notebook. He picked up the notebook and flipped through its pages, his brow furrowing as he recognized the handwritten notes detailing routes and delivery schedules. "Kane," he called out, holding up the notebook. "I think I've got something." She crossed the room and took the notebook from him, her eyes scanning the pages. "This matches some of the routes we saw on the map from the first warehouse." Her gaze sharpened. "This could be what we need to tie everything together." A sudden noise from the far end of the warehouse made them both freeze. It was faint, a metallic clatter like something being knocked over. Kane's hand went to her radio. "Team B, report. Did anyone move to the south side of the building?" A crackle of static followed by, "Negative. No movement on our end." Jeff's heart thudded in his chest. "Someone's here." Kane nodded, her grip tightening on her radio. "Everyone stay sharp, we've got company." They moved quickly but quietly, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they made their way toward the source of the noise. The air grew colder the deeper they went, and the smell of damp concrete intensified. Jeff's breath came in short bursts, his boots barely making a sound as he followed Kane down a narrow corridor. His mind raced with possibilities. Was it a guard? Another victim trying to escape? Or something worse? The corridor ended at a heavy steel door, slightly ajar. Kane held up a hand, signaling for silence. She pressed her ear to the door, listening intently, before slowly pushing it open. The room beyond was small and dimly lit, with a single overhead bulb flickering weakly. A man stood near the back wall, his hands trembling as he frantically stuffed documents into a duffel bag. He didn't notice them at first, too focused on his task, but when the beam of Kane's flashlight hit him, he froze. "Don't move," Kane barked, drawing her weapon. The man's eyes darted toward the door, calculating his chances of escape. But before he could make a move, Jeff stepped forward, blocking his path. "You're not going anywhere," Jeff said, his voice cold. The man's shoulders slumped and the duffel bag slipped from his hands, hitting the floor with a dull thud. Kane kept her weapon trained on him as another officer entered the room and cuffed the man's hands behind his back. "We've got him," Kane said into her radio. "Bring the van around for transport." As the officers led the man out, Jeff knelt down and unzipped the duffel bag. Inside, he found stacks of cash, burner phones, and a laptop. But it was the folder tucked at the bottom that caught his attention. He pulled it out and opened it, his heart pounding as he read the names and photographs inside. "Kane," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "It's a list of victims. Lily's name is on here." Kane's eyes darkened as she looked over his shoulder. "Then this isn't just a drop point. It's a central hub. If we can trace the names on this list, we'll be able to dismantle the entire network." Jeff exhaled shakily, the weight of the discovery pressing down on him. They were finally getting somewhere. But as he stared at the names of the other victims, he knew this was only the beginning. Because for every name on that list, there was a story waiting to be told. And Jeff wasn't going to stop until every last one of them had a chance to be heard. The ride back to the station was quiet, but inside Jeff's head a storm raged. The list of victims sat on his lap, the names and photographs burned into his mind. Lily had been one of the lucky ones, saved before she could be lost forever. But what about the others? He traced his finger over the name of a boy, maybe 12 years old, with messy hair and a shy smile in his picture. Aaron Mendoza. Beneath the photo, scrawled in messy handwriting, were the words, "Delivered, Route 19. Jeff clenched his jaw, the weight of those words hitting him like a punch to the gut. Delivered, like cargo, like he wasn't even a person. His hand tightened around the folder, crumpling the edges. "You okay?" Kane's voice broke through his thoughts. Jeff blinked and looked up to see her watching him from the driver's seat. They were stopped at a red light, the early morning sun casting a pale glow over the snowy streets. The heater hummed softly, but the warmth did little to ease the tension in his chest. "I'm fine," he lied, though the crack in his voice betrayed him. "Just thinking about what happens next." Kane nodded, her eyes lingering on him for a moment before turning back to the road. "We're going to act fast," she said. "The names on that list give us something solid, locations. Delivery routes, drop-off points. We've got state police involved now, and they're setting up coordinated raids. We're going after every location we can find." "That's good," Jeff said quietly. "But what if we're too late?" Kane didn't answer right away. Instead, she tightened her grip on the steering wheel, her knuckles turning white. "We won't save them all," she admitted. "I wish I could promise otherwise, but I can't. What I can promise is that we'll do everything we can to shut this down. They won't get away with this." Jeff looked out the window, watching the snow-covered world blur past. "I wish I'd seen the signs sooner," he muttered. "All those years on the road, how many times did I pass places like that warehouse and not even know it?" Kane glanced at him, her expression softening. "You can't blame yourself for not knowing what wasn't in front of you. But you're here now, and that's what matters." Jeff nodded, though the guilt still weighed heavy. He wasn't sure if it would ever go away. Back at the station, the air was buzzing with activity. Officers moved quickly, phones rang off the hook, and the whiteboard in the briefing room was now covered with maps, photographs, and updates from ongoing raids. Jeff followed Kane to her desk, where a young officer was pinning new documents to the board. "What's the latest?" Kane asked. The officer adjusted his glasses and pointed to the board. "We've already hit 2 locations from the list. One was empty, looked like they cleared out in a hurry, but the second raid was successful. We found 2 girls, both under 14. They're being taken to a hospital now for evaluation." Jeff felt a flicker of relief. But it was short-lived. For every success, there were countless unknowns. "What about the ringleaders?" Jeff asked. "Any leads on who's running this thing?" The officer shook his head. "Not yet. We're still digging through the documents from the warehouse. It's going to take time to connect all the dots." Jeff frowned, his frustration simmering beneath the surface. Time was a luxury the victims didn't have. Kane placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll get there," she said firmly. "I promise." Just then, her phone buzzed, and she quickly answered it. Jeff watched as her expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "Where?" she asked sharply. There was a pause, then she nodded. "We're on our way." She hung up and grabbed her jacket. Another location just popped up. It's a rest stop about 30 miles from here. One of the names on the list was flagged in the system. An Amber Alert was issued for a 13-year-old girl named Ava. She was last seen near that rest stop yesterday. Jeff's heart skipped a beat. "Then we need to move." Kane didn't argue. Let's go. The drive to the rest stop felt longer than it was, the tension inside the car thick enough to cut with a knife. Jeff stared straight ahead, his hands gripping his knees as Kane weaved through traffic. Snow piled along the sides of the road, but the pavement was mostly clear, allowing them to keep a steady pace. You think she's still there? Jeff asked, breaking the silence. Kane exhaled through her nose. I hope so. If we're lucky, the traffickers haven't moved her yet. Rest stops are often temporary holding spots. They don't like to stay in one place for too long. The thought made Jeff's stomach churn. He had stopped at hundreds of rest stops during his years on the road. They had always seemed so ordinary. Families stretching their legs, truckers grabbing coffee, kids running to the vending machines. He had never imagined the darker side lurking just out of view. They pulled into the parking lot of the rest stop, which was partially empty except for a few trucks and cars. The building itself was small, with vending machines lining the walls outside and a row of benches partially buried in snow. Kane parked near the entrance, and they quickly got out, their boots crunching through the icy slush. The cold bit at Jeff's face, but he ignored it. His focus was on the task ahead. Split up, Kane said, her breath fogging the air. Check the restrooms, the vending area, and the parking lot. If you see anything suspicious, radio me. Jeff nodded and headed toward the restrooms. The cold fluorescent lights flickered overhead as he pushed the door open. The room was empty, the stalls all open, but something felt off. He couldn't explain it. It was just a gut feeling. He stepped outside and scanned the area, his breath coming in short bursts. His eyes locked on a small silver car parked at the far end of the lot, partially hidden by a snowbank. The windows were fogged, but he could see movement inside. His heart pounded as he approached the car, his footsteps silent against the snow. When he reached the driver's side, he cupped his hands around his face and peered through the frosted glass. A girl was huddled in the back seat, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. She looked up, her eyes wide with fear, and Jeff recognized her instantly from the photograph in the folder. Ava. He knocked gently on the window. It's okay, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm here to help. The door unlocked with a soft click, and Jeff carefully opened it. Ava's breath hitched as she stared at him, tears streaming down her face. Are they still here? Jeff asked gently. She shook her head, sobbing quietly. They left me. They said they'd be back, but I didn't believe them. Jeff's throat tightened. You're safe now, he promised, pulling out his radio. Kane, I found her. She's in the car at the far end of the lot. I'm on my way, Kane responded. Jeff turned back to Ava, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. It's over now. No one's going to hurt you. She leaned forward, resting her head against his chest as she sobbed. Jeff wrapped his arms around her, holding her as the weight of everything she had endured finally came crashing down. And as the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the lot, Jeff knew that while the fight wasn't over, they had won this battle. For Ava, and for every other name on that list, they would keep fighting. Ava clung to Jeff like a lifeline, her fragile body trembling against him as the cold morning air nipped at their faces. He gently stroked her back, murmuring soft reassurances. She was safe now, but the way her fingers gripped his jacket, as if letting go would send her back into the nightmare she'd barely escaped, made Jeff's heart ache. Kane arrived moments later, her boots crunching in the snow as she jogged to the car. She crouched beside them, her breath fogging in the cold air. Hey, Ava, she said gently, her voice warm and calm. I'm Officer Kane. We're going to take you somewhere safe, okay? Ava lifted her tear-streaked face from Jeff's chest, her wide, frightened eyes darting between Kane and the rest of the parking lot. Are they gone? She whispered. They're gone, Jeff assured her. No one's going to hurt you anymore. Kane extended her hand and Ava hesitated before taking it. She held onto Jeff's sleeve with her other hand, unwilling to let him go completely. They walked her to Kane's car, where a blanket was waiting in the back seat. Jeff helped her climb in and wrapped the blanket around her shoulders. We'll take her to the hospital for a checkup, Kane said, her tone firm but kind. Then she'll be placed with child services until we can locate her family." Ava's eyes filled with fresh tears. "They won't find me," she whispered. "My mom doesn't know where I am. They moved me too many times." Jeff's chest tightened. He crouched by the open door and met her gaze. "We're going to find her," he promised. "No matter what it takes, we'll find her." Kane gently closed the door and turned to Jeff. "You okay?" He exhaled slowly, standing up and wiping his hands on his jeans. "I don't think okay is the right word, but I'm here. What's next?" Kane sighed, her breath creating a cloud in the crisp air. "We bring her in, then regroup. We've still got more names on that list and every minute counts." The ride back to the station was tense, but Ava had fallen asleep in the back seat, her head resting against the window. Jeff glanced back at her every few minutes, as if he needed to reassure himself that she was still there, still safe. He thought about Lily and the way she had clung to him the night before. The faces of both girls blurred together in his mind, along with still safe. He thought about Lily and the way she had clung to him the night before. The faces of both girls blurred together in his mind, along with the dozens of others whose names were written in that ledger. How many more were out there, waiting to be found? When they pulled into the station, paramedics were already waiting. They gently lifted Ava from the car, and she stirred slightly, murmuring something Jeff couldn't make out. He watched as they carried her inside, the weight of her disappearance and her rescue settling heavy on his shoulders. "Let's get inside," Kane said, touching his arm lightly. "We've got work to do." The briefing room was buzzing with activity. Maps and documents covered the walls and officers moved quickly between desks, updating reports and coordinating with teams in the field. The air was thick with urgency, the stakes higher than ever. Kane led Jeff to a desk where a young officer was typing furiously on a computer. "What do we have on Ava's case?" she asked. The officer didn't look up. "I ran her name through the missing persons database. She was reported missing 3 months ago from a small town about 2 hours north of here. No contact with her family since the abduction, but the report mentioned that her mother was cooperative and provided as much information as she could." Kane nodded thoughtfully. "Then we need to reach out to her as soon as possible." Jeff leaned over the desk, his eyes scanning the screen. "And what about the traffickers who left her at the rest stop? Any leads on their next move?" The officer shook his head. "Not yet, but we're analyzing the GPS data from the phones we recovered. If they've been using the same roads consistently, we might be able to predict their next location." "Let me see the map," Jeff said. The officer pulled up a digital map with several routes highlighted in red. Jeff traced one of the lines with his finger, recognizing it instantly. "This route here," he said, tapping the screen. "It cuts through rural areas and leads to an interstate. If they're trying to move people without being seen, they'll stick to back roads like this." Kane leaned in, studying the map. "There's a motel along this route," she said. "It's remote, barely advertised, and mostly used by truckers. If they're regrouping, that could be where they're headed." Jeff nodded. "Then that's where we need to go next." The sun was higher in the sky now, casting long shadows across the snow-covered landscape as they drove toward the motel. The road was quiet, the trees lining the highway bending gently under the weight of the snow. Jeff stared out the window, his mind replaying Ava's words over and over. "They moved me too many times." "How do they keep getting away with this?" he asked, breaking the silence. "How do they keep moving kids like cargo without anyone noticing?" Kane exhaled sharply, her fingers tapping against the steering wheel. "Because they're careful. They stay off the radar, change vehicles often, and use places like this motel that don't ask questions. And when they do get caught, the people at the top make sure the middlemen take the fall. But we're closing in on them," Jeff said, more to himself than to her. "We are," Kane agreed, "but it's going to get messy. They know we're onto them now, and that makes them dangerous. If they think they're cornered, they won't go quietly." Jeff's stomach knotted at the thought. He didn't care how dangerous it got. He wasn't going to back down. The motel came into view, a rundown building with peeling paint and a faded neon sign that flickered intermittently. A few cars and trucks were parked in the lot, their windows fogged from the cold. Kane parked a short distance away, and they both stepped out, the crunch of their boots echoing in the quiet morning. She radioed the team that had followed them, instructing them to surround the building and be ready for anything. Jeff scanned the lot, his eyes narrowing on a blue van parked near the side entrance. "That van," he said. "It's the same make and model as the one listed in the report from the first warehouse." Kane nodded, her jaw tightening. "Then we're in the right place." They approached the motel quietly, their footsteps muffled by the snow. Kane gestured toward the side entrance and Jeff followed her lead, his pulse pounding in his ears. The door creaked as they pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit hallway lined with stained carpets and flickering lights. Room 12. That's where the lead had pointed them. Kane motioned for Jeff to stay back as she drew her weapon and approached the door. She knocked once, twice. "Police, open up!" There was a scuffle inside, followed by the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor. Jeff's instincts kicked in. Without waiting for permission, he charged forward, kicking the door open with all his strength. Inside, the scene was chaos. Two men scrambled toward the back window, trying to escape. But officers burst through the door behind them, blocking their path. One of the men lunged at Jeff, but he dodged the attack and shoved him against the wall, pinning him there until the cuffs clicked around his wrists. The second man was tackled by Kane, who wrestled him to the ground with practiced ease. As the room fell silent, Jeff's breath came in heavy gasps. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on a small closet with the door slightly ajar. He crossed the room in 2 quick strides and flung it open. Inside, huddled in the corner, was a boy no older than 12. His eyes were wide with fear, and he recoiled as Jeff reached for him. "It's okay," Jeff said softly. Kneeling down, "We're here to help." The boy hesitated before taking Jeff's hand, his small fingers cold and trembling. Kane stood behind them, her expression grim. "One more saved," she said quietly. Jeff swallowed hard, lifting the boy into his arms. But how many more are still out there? Kane didn't have an answer, and Jeff wasn't sure he wanted to hear it. The boy clung to Jeff as they made their way out of the motel room, his thin arms wrapped tightly around Jeff's neck as if letting go would send him back into the nightmare he'd just escaped. Jeff could feel the tremble in the boy's body, his breath warm against Jeff's shoulder. The kid weighed so little it was like carrying a bundle of air, an unsettling reminder of how malnourished and vulnerable he was. Outside, the cold air bit at Jeff's face, but he didn't care. The sun had risen higher now, casting long beams of light across the snow-covered parking lot. Police cars surrounded the area, their lights flashing in rhythmic patterns of red and blue. Officers escorted the two men, now in handcuffs, out of the motel, shoving them into the back of a waiting squad car. The boy buried his face in Jeff's shoulder as the doors slammed shut behind the traffickers. Jeff felt the kid flinch, like the sound itself was a trigger. Kane jogged over, her breath visible in the frigid air. "They're secured," she said, her voice steady. "We'll take them to the station for questioning. If they know anything about the higher-ups, we'll get it out of them." Jeff nodded, but his focus remained on the boy in his arms. "What's your name?" "Buddy?" he asked softly. The boy hesitated, then whispered, "Aaron." Jeff's chest tightened. He recognized the name instantly, Aaron Mendoza, from the list in the ledger. Seeing the boy's name on paper had been one thing. Holding him now, feeling the fear and fragility radiating from him, made it painfully real. "Hey, Aaron," Jeff said gently. "It's okay now, you're safe." Aaron didn't respond, but Jeff could feel his small fingers gripping the fabric of his jacket, as if the boy was too scared to let go. "We need to get him checked out," Kane said. "The paramedics are on their way, but it wouldn't hurt to get him warm while we wait." Jeff nodded and carried Aaron to one of the police SUVs, where Kane opened the door for him. He climbed inside, settling Aaron in the back seat and wrapping him in one of the emergency blankets stored in the trunk. The boy's eyes darted around the vehicle, as if he expected someone to burst through the door and take him away again. Jeff crouched beside him, keeping his voice calm. No one's going to hurt you, Aaron. Not anymore. Aaron blinked up at him, tears brimming in his eyes. Are you sure? Jeff swallowed the lump in his throat. I'm sure. A few minutes later, the paramedics arrived, their truck pulling up next to the SUV. One of them, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a calm demeanor, approached Jeff. We'll take it from here, he said gently. Aaron's fingers tightened around Jeff's sleeve, panic flickering across his face. No, he whimpered. Don't leave me. Jeff knelt down, his hand resting on the boy's shoulder. I'm not going anywhere, he promised. I'll be right here the whole time. Aaron nodded reluctantly, and the paramedics helped him onto the stretcher, wrapping him securely in blankets. They checked his vitals, asked him a few questions, and reassured him that he would be taken to a warm hospital bed where they'd make sure he was okay. As they loaded him into the ambulance, Aaron's small hand reached out, searching for Jeff's. Jeff clasped it, holding on until the last possible second before the doors closed. Kane stood beside him, watching as the ambulance pulled away. He'll be in good hands, she said. They'll notify child services and start looking for his family. Jeff exhaled slowly, his breath visible in the cold morning air. Do you think they'll find them? Kane didn't answer right away. I hope so, she said finally. But if they can't, there are people who will take care of him. He won't be alone. Jeff rubbed his hands together, trying to shake off the cold that had settled deep in his bones. How many kids have we saved so far? 4, Kane replied. Lily, Ava, Aaron, and the 2 girls from the warehouse raid. 4, Jeff repeated, his voice hollow. And how many names were on that list? Kane sighed, the weight of his question evident in her posture. Too many, she admitted. But we're making progress. Every raid, every arrest brings us closer to shutting this down for good. Jeff nodded, though the guilt still gnawed at him. 4 was better than none, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Back at the station, the interrogation room was dimly lit, the overhead bulb casting a harsh glow over the table where one of the traffickers sat in handcuffs. His greasy hair clung to his forehead, and his eyes darted nervously around the room. Kane stood by the door, arms crossed, while Jeff leaned against the wall, his gaze fixed on the man like a predator watching prey. We found the kid, Kane said, her voice cold. Aaron Mendoza. Recognize the name? The man shifted in his seat, but he didn't respond. Kane slapped a file onto the table, the sound echoing through the small room. This is what's going to happen, she said. You're going to tell us who's running this operation, or I'm going to make sure you spend the rest of your life in a cell so small you won't even have room to breathe. The man chuckled. But it was a hollow sound. You think you're the first cop to threaten me? I'm not telling you anything. Jeff stepped forward, his boots thudding heavily against the floor. He placed his hands on the table and leaned in, his face inches from the man's. I don't care what happens to you, he said, his voice low and deadly. But if you don't help us find the rest of those kids, you're going to wish you had. Because I'm not a cop. I don't have to play by the rules. The man's smirk faltered, and for the first time, Jeff saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. Kane placed a hand on Jeff's shoulder, gently pulling him back. Let's give him some time to think, she said. They stepped out of the room and Jeff paced the hallway, his fists clenched at his sides. He knows something, he said. I could see it in his eyes. Kane nodded. We'll break him. But we have to be smart about it. If we push too hard, he could shut down completely. Jeff ran a hand through his hair, frustration boiling beneath the surface. We're running out of time, Kane. Every minute we waste here is another minute those kids are out there, scared and alone. I know, Kane said quietly. Believe me, I know. Just then, her phone buzzed, and she quickly answered it. Her eyes widened as she listened to the voice on the other end. Are you sure? She asked. There was a pause, then she nodded. We're on our way. She hung up and turned to Jeff, her expression serious. We've got another location, an abandoned farmhouse just outside the city. The tech team tracked a call from one of the burner phones to that area less than an hour ago. Jeff didn't hesitate. Let's go. The drive to the farmhouse was tense, the snow-covered road winding through fields and dense trees. Jeff gripped the door handle as the car sped along, his mind racing. This time, he wasn't going to let anyone slip through their fingers. As they pulled up to the property, the old farmhouse loomed ahead like something out of a ghost story. The paint was peeling, the windows boarded up, and the roof sagged under the weight of years of neglect. Kane parked the car, and they stepped out, their boots sinking into the snow. Officers surrounded the building, their weapons drawn as they prepared to breach the front door. Jeff stood beside Kane, his breath coming in short, determined bursts. "Ready?" Kane asked. Jeff nodded, his heart pounding. "Let's end this." With a signal from Kane, the officers moved in and the door splintered open. What they found inside would haunt Jeff forever. The door crashed open, splinters flying as officers stormed inside, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Jeff followed close behind Kane, his pulse racing like a freight train. The air inside was stale, thick with the smell of damp wood and mildew. Dust floated in the beams of light, but the quietness of the house was what unnerved him most. Everything was still, too still. They moved cautiously through the entryway, their boots creaking against the old wooden floor. The house looked like it hadn't been lived in for years. Faded wallpaper peeled off the walls, and broken furniture lay scattered across the floor. A staircase with a missing banister led to the second floor, its steps warped with age. "Clear the main level," Kane ordered, her voice barely above a whisper. "2 teams upstairs, and check the basement." The officers fanned out, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. Jeff's flashlight swept across the room, revealing overturned chairs and an old wooden table covered in dust. He felt like he was walking through the aftermath of something terrible, like the house itself had absorbed the horrors it had witnessed. He followed Kane down a narrow hallway that led to a kitchen at the back of the house. Broken cabinets hung off their hinges, and the smell of mold was stronger here. Jeff's eyes landed on a pile of empty food containers stacked on the counter, cans of beans, instant noodles, and boxes of crackers. Someone had been here recently. "There's no way this place is abandoned," Jeff whispered. "They've been using it as a safe house." Kane nodded, her jaw tightening. "We need to find out if they left anyone behind." Just then, a voice crackled over Kane's radio. "Team B, we've got movement in the basement requesting backup." Kane didn't hesitate. "Let's go." They rushed down the hallway and found the entrance to the basement. A heavy wooden door with rusted hinges. One of the officers pried it open, and a gust of cold, damp air hit them. The stairway leading down was dark, but the sound of muffled sobs echoed from below. Jeff's stomach dropped. His grip tightened around the flashlight as he followed the team down the stairs. The air growing colder with each step. The basement was dimly lit by a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting long shadows across the cracked concrete walls. In the far corner of the room, they saw them, 2 children, huddled together on a dirty mattress, their small bodies shaking with fear. A boy no older than 7 clung to a girl who looked to be about 9. Their clothes were filthy, and their faces were streaked with tears. "Hey, it's okay," Kane said gently, lowering her weapon and approaching them slowly. "We're here to help." The girl flinched, pulling the boy closer. "Don't hurt us," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jeff's heart shattered. He knelt beside them, his voice soft and steady. "No one's going to hurt you. I promise." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a granola bar, unwrapping it and holding it out to them. "Here, you're safe now." The girl hesitated, her wide eyes darting between Jeff and Kane. But hunger won out, and she took the granola bar, breaking it in half and giving a piece to the boy. They ate quickly like they hadn't had a proper meal in days. "What's your name?" Jeff asked softly. The girl swallowed hard before answering. "Sophie, and this is my brother Ben." "Sophie and Ben," Jeff repeated, his voice warm. "You're really brave, you know that?" Sophie's eyes filled with tears, and her lower lip trembled. "Are you going to take us away?" Jeff's throat tightened. "We're going to take you somewhere safe." where no one can hurt you. Do you know how long you've been here? Sophie shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. A long time. They kept saying they'd take us back to our mom, but they didn't. They just kept moving us. Jeff fought the urge to punch the nearest wall. He couldn't stand the thought of these kids being lied to, used, and discarded like they didn't matter. He reached out and gently wiped a tear from Sophie's face. "We're going to find her," he promised. "We're going to find your mom." Ben, who had been silent the entire time, finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Are they gone?" Jeff nodded. "Yeah, buddy, they're gone." Kane radioed for the paramedics, her voice calm but urgent. "We've got 2 minors, both under 10. They need immediate medical attention." As the team worked to secure the area, Jeff stayed by Sophie and Ben's side, refusing to leave them alone. He helped Sophie to her feet, wrapping the blanket from his pack around her shoulders, and then lifted Ben into his arms. The boy rested his head against Jeff's shoulder, his small body trembling from exhaustion and fear. When they emerged from the basement, the morning light hit their faces, casting long shadows across the snow-covered yard. The paramedics were waiting, and Jeff carefully handed Ben over to them before turning back to Sophie. She held his hand tightly, her fingers cold but determined. "You're going to be okay," Jeff whispered. "I'll make sure of it." Sophie nodded, tears still streaming down her face. "Thank you," she said softly. Kane walked over, her expression somber. "They're lucky we found them," she said. "Another day or two and who knows where they would have been taken." Jeff clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. "I don't want to think about that." Kane placed a hand on his shoulder, her grip firm. "We've done good work today, Jeff, but there's still more to do." "I know," he said, his voice low but determined, "and I'm not stopping until we get them all." Back at the station, Jeff sat in the break room, nursing a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. His mind raced, replaying the events of the day, the fear in Sophie's eyes, the way Ben had clung to him, the sound of their sobs in the basement. He had saved them, but the weight of their trauma hung over him like a storm cloud. Kane entered the room, pulling up a chair across from him. "You've been quiet," she said, her voice soft. Jeff stared into his coffee. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if we hadn't found them in time." Kane exhaled slowly, leaning forward. "You did find them. That's what matters." Jeff looked up, his eyes filled with guilt. "But how many more are still out there? How many basements like that one are waiting to be found?" Kane didn't have an answer, and Jeff didn't expect her to. But he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't giving up. Not until every last one of them was safe. The moon was high in the sky when Jeff finally left the police station. The night air was bitterly cold, but the stillness of it felt strangely comforting after the chaos of the day. He stuffed his hands into the pockets of his jacket and leaned against his truck, exhaling slowly as his breath formed a cloud in front of him. The images of Sophie and Ben clung to him, Sophie's wide, tear-filled eyes and Ben's tiny frame trembling against his chest. No matter how much he wanted to push those memories away, they wouldn't let go. The door to the station creaked open, and Kane stepped out, her boots crunching softly against the snow. She carried 2 steaming cups of coffee, handing one to Jeff without a word. They stood in silence for a moment, the warmth from the cup slowly spreading through Jeff's numb fingers. "You should go home," Kane said, finally breaking the quiet. "You've done more than enough today." Jeff shook his head. "I can't. Not yet." Kane sighed, rubbing the bridge of her nose. "Jeff, you can't carry all of this on your shoulders. We saved Sophie and Ben today. That's a win. You need to let yourself breathe." Jeff stared at the coffee in his hands. "I know we saved them. But what about the others? What about the kids whose names are still on that list?" His voice cracked, the weight of his emotions threatening to spill over. "I can't stop thinking about them. Every time I close my eyes, I see their faces, hear their cries. What if we're too late for the next one?" Kane placed a hand on his shoulder, her grip steady. "We're not giving up. You've seen that. Every officer in this building is working around the clock to track down every lead. You don't have to do this alone. Jeff exhaled shakily, the weight in his chest loosening slightly. I know, He paused, struggling to find the words. I've been on the road most of my life. I've seen so many things, Kane. People in trouble, kids running away, women hitchhiking with nothing but fear in their eyes. And I always told myself it wasn't my business that someone else would help them. But now, knowing what I know, Kane's eyes softened. Now you can't look away. Jeff nodded. Exactly. She squeezed his shoulder. Then don't. But take breaks when you need to. If you burn out, you won't be able to help anyone. Jeff let her words sink in. He knew she was right, but the thought of taking a step back felt like abandoning the kids who were still out there. He took a sip of the coffee, the bitter warmth grounding him. Any new leads on the traffickers from the farmhouse? He asked. Kane hesitated before answering. We're still working on it. One of the guys we arrested gave us a partial name, Vinny. He's supposedly a mid-level player in the operation, but he knows the higher-ups. If we can find him, he could be the key to shutting this down for good. Where is he now? We don't know yet, Kane admitted, but our tech team is tracking a phone number linked to him. He's been using burner phones to stay off the grid, but we think he's holed up somewhere in the city. Jeff's mind raced. If you find him, I want in on the takedown. Kane raised an eyebrow. Jeff, this isn't your fight. It is now, he said firmly. I've come this far, I'm not stopping. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. Okay, but you follow my lead, no heroics. Jeff managed a small smile. I'll try. The next morning, Jeff woke to the sound of his phone buzzing on the nightstand. He fumbled for it, groggy and disoriented, until he saw Kane's name flashing on the screen. He sat up instantly, his heart racing. Yeah, he answered. We've got him, Kane said. Her voice was sharp, all business. Vinny, he's at a motel on the west side of town. We're moving in now. Jeff threw on his clothes and grabbed his jacket, barely taking the time to lace up his boots before rushing out the door. His truck roared to life, and he sped through the snowy streets, the morning light casting long shadows across the road. The cold air bit at his face through the crack in the window, but he didn't care. By the time he reached the motel, the place was already swarming with police. Squad cars lined the parking lot, and officers moved into formation around the building, their weapons drawn. Jeff spotted Kane near the entrance, her radio pressed to her ear as she issued instructions. He jogged over to her, breathless. What's the plan? Kane didn't miss a beat. Vinny's in room 203. We've got eyes on him through the window and he's not alone. 2 men with him, both armed. We're waiting for the green light to move in. Jeff's pulse quickened. You think they have kids in there? Possibly, Kane said. We're prepared for anything. Before Jeff could respond, the green light came over the radio and the team moved in. The door to room 203 burst open with a loud crash, and officers flooded the room, shouting commands. Jeff stood back, his fists clenched as he waited for the all-clear. A few moments later, the first officer emerged, dragging one of the men in handcuffs. Vinny followed shortly after, his face twisted in anger as he was shoved into the back of a squad car. Kane approached Jeff, her expression tense. No kids in the room, she said. But we found something else, a laptop and a stack of documents. If there's a digital trail, we'll find it. Jeff exhaled, relief and frustration warring within him. It's not the ending I was hoping for, but it's a start. Kane nodded. We'll interrogate Vinny back at the station. If he knows anything, we'll get it out of him. Jeff watched as the last of the suspects were loaded into the squad cars, their muffled curses drowned out by the roar of the engines. The snow had started falling again, light flakes drifting lazily to the ground. We're getting closer, Jeff said quietly. I can feel it. Kane smiled faintly. So can I. They stood there for a moment, watching as the convoy of police vehicles disappeared down the road. The motel parking lot fell silent, but the weight of the fight ahead still lingered in the air. Jeff stuffed his hands into his pockets, his breath fogging in the cold. "Let's get back to the station," he said. "We've got more work to do." Kane nodded. "Let's finish this." With renewed determination, they headed back to the station, knowing that the next piece of the puzzle was waiting to be uncovered. The walls of the interrogation room were painted a dull gray, the kind of color that sucked the warmth out of the air. A fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the metal table. Jeff stood behind the one-way mirror, arms crossed, as he watched Vinny sit in the chair, slouched and cocky, like he didn't have a care in the world. His lips curled into a smug smile as if this was a game he was confident he could win. "Arrogant prick," Jeff muttered under his breath. Kane stood next to him, flipping through a file of information they had on Vinny. "They always start out like that," she said. "It won't last." She snapped the file shut and glanced at Jeff. "You sure you want to be here for this? Interrogations can get messy." "I'm not going anywhere," Jeff said firmly. "He knows where those kids are, and I'm not leaving until we get it out of him." Kane nodded. "Let me take the lead. But if you see an opening, jump in." Jeff didn't need to be told twice. His blood was already boiling, and it was taking every ounce of restraint not to storm into the room and grab Vinny by the collar. But Kane was right. This needed to be handled smartly. If they pushed too hard, Vinny could shut down or lawyer up. Kane entered the interrogation room, her footsteps echoing off the concrete floor. She pulled out the chair across from Vinny and sat down, setting the file on the table with a deliberate thud. Vinny leaned back, his hands cuffed in front of him, and grinned. "Didn't take you long to come knocking, huh?" Vinny said, his voice slick like oil. "I figured you'd be here." Kane didn't flinch. "You made it easy, Vinny. Leaving behind all those burner phones, sloppily encrypted messages, almost like you wanted to get caught." Vinny chuckled, tapping his fingers against the table. "You think this is a win for you? I'm small time. You won't get to the top with me." Kane leaned forward, her gaze sharp. "I don't need you to take us to the top. I just need you to take us one step higher. And if you don't, I'll make sure you're stuck in a cell for the rest of your miserable life." Vinny's grin faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. "I've heard that before." Jeff couldn't take it anymore. He pushed open the door and stepped inside, the sound making Vinny glance up. Kane didn't say a word, letting him take over. Jeff pulled out the chair next to Kane and sat down, leaning forward with his elbows on the table. He stared at Vinny for a long moment, saying nothing, just letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. "You ever look a kid in the eyes after they've been through hell, Vinny?" Jeff finally asked, his voice low and steady. "You ever see the fear that doesn't go away, the way they flinch at every noise because they don't know who to trust anymore?" Vinny's smile faltered again, and this time it didn't return as quickly. "I have," Jeff continued, his voice growing harder. "I carried a boy out of a basement yesterday. He couldn't even speak because he was so scared. I've seen girls cling to their rescuers like they're drowning because they think they'll be taken away again." "And you're telling me you're small time? Don't play that game with me. You're part of this. You're responsible for every name on that list." Vinny shifted in his seat, his confidence slipping. His fingers tapped against the table, but the rhythm was uneven now, jittery. "I'm just the driver," he said defensively. "I move people from one place to another. I don't call the shots." "Then tell us who does," Kane said, her voice cold. "Give us the names of the people running this, and maybe we can work something out for you." Vinny hesitated, his gaze darting between Kane and Jeff. The tension in the room was suffocating, like a noose tightening around his neck. He licked his lips, his breathing quickening. "Vinny," Jeff said softly, leaning in closer, "you're not getting out of this clean. The only choice you have is whether you go down alone or take the real monsters down with you." The room fell silent, the only sound the faint hum of the fluorescent light. For a moment it seemed like Vinny wouldn't crack, but then his shoulders sagged and the fight drained out of him. "There's a guy," Vinny said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They call him Dante. I don't know his real name, but he's high up. Maybe not at the top, but close. He's the one who gives the orders." Kane leaned forward. "Where do we find him?" Vinny shook his head. I don't know exactly. He moves around a lot, but he's got a place on the outskirts of town, an old warehouse near the industrial district. That's where he likes to conduct business. Jeff's fists clenched under the table. What kind of business? Vinny swallowed hard. He moves kids, trades them, buys them, sells them, whatever the client wants. Jeff felt a surge of anger rise in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. When's the next delivery? Tomorrow night, Vinny said. They're moving a group of kids across state lines. If you want to catch him, that's your chance. Kane stood, gathering the file from the table. You've made the right choice, Vinny, but if we find out you're lying, you won't see daylight for a long time. Vinny nodded weakly, the fight completely drained out of him. As they left the interrogation room, Jeff's mind raced. Tomorrow night. It wasn't much time, but it was enough to plan, enough to act, enough to save them. Kane pulled him aside in the hallway. We'll coordinate with the feds, she said. This isn't just a local problem anymore. If Dante's as big as Vinny says, this could lead to a nationwide operation. Jeff nodded, his jaw tight. I don't care how big it is, I just want those kids back. Kane placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes filled with determination. We'll get them. Jeff exhaled slowly, the weight of the upcoming raid settling heavily on him. Tomorrow night could be their last chance to catch Dante and end this nightmare. And he wasn't going to let it slip away. The dim glow of the setting sun filtered through the blinds of the police station's briefing room, casting long shadows across the maps and documents spread out on the table. The room buzzed with tension as officers shuffled through papers, checked their weapons, and reviewed their roles for the upcoming raid. Outside, the sky darkened quickly, the promise of another cold night settling over the city like a heavy blanket. Jeff stood near the board, tracing the route the traffickers were planning to take. The map was marked with pins and lines, each one representing a checkpoint or potential stop. The old warehouse where Dante was supposedly operating from sat on the outskirts of town, surrounded by empty industrial lots and abandoned buildings. It was the perfect place to hide something, or someone, you didn't want found. Kane entered the room, her presence commanding as she clapped her hands to get everyone's attention. Listen up, she said, her voice cutting through the noise. We've confirmed that the delivery is set for tonight. Our target is the warehouse, where they're holding multiple minors before transporting them across state lines. This is our best shot at dismantling a major part of the trafficking ring. And we're not leaving until we have them. She pointed to the map. SWAT will breach from the west entrance. Team B will cover the east side, and Team C will block any exits. Jeff, you're with me. We'll be entering through the main loading dock. Jeff's heart pounded, but he kept his face neutral. This was what he'd been waiting for, a chance to put an end to the nightmare. Understood, he said. Kane's gaze lingered on him for a moment, as if she could see the weight he was carrying. Stick close to me, she said softly. We'll get through this. The convoy of police vehicles moved through the dark streets like shadows, their lights off to avoid detection. Jeff sat in the passenger seat of Kane's car, staring out the window as the city blurred past. The glow of streetlights reflected off the wet pavement, and the hum of the engine was the only sound filling the silence between them. You ready for this? Kane asked, her eyes never leaving the road. Jeff nodded, though his throat was dry. I have to be. Kane glanced at him briefly. I know this is personal for you, but you've got to stay focused. Once we're inside, things are going to move fast. Don't let your emotions cloud your judgment. Jeff clenched his fists in his lap. I won't. But deep down, he knew it wouldn't be that simple. How could he stay calm when he knew there were kids inside that warehouse, terrified and alone, waiting for someone to save them? The warehouse came into view, its massive silhouette looming against the night sky. The building was old, with rusted metal walls and broken windows that glinted in the moonlight. Surrounding it were overgrown weeds and piles of scrap metal, creating an eerie landscape that seemed frozen in time. Kane parked the car a few blocks away, and they joined the rest of the team, who were gathered behind an abandoned building across the street. The cold air bit at Jeff's skin, but he barely noticed. His focus was on the warehouse, on what lay inside. Kane handed him a radio earpiece and adjusted her vest. "Stay close," she reminded him. Jeff nodded, his breath fogging in the night air. "Let's do this." The team moved quickly and silently, their boots crunching softly against the gravel as they approached the warehouse. The darkness was their cover, but Jeff knew it wouldn't last. As soon as they breached the building, chaos would follow. Kane signaled for the team to take their positions. Jeff followed her to the main loading dock, where a large metal door stood partially open. The faint sound of voices drifted out, muffled but distinct. Jeff's pulse quickened. "They're in there." Kane motioned to the SWAT officer beside her, who nodded and prepared the breach charge. Jeff took a deep breath, his fingers tightening around the flashlight in his hand. The officer counted down silently, 3, 2, 1, before placing the charge against the door. A loud boom shattered the night, and the door burst open. The team flooded inside, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as shouts of, "Police! Get on the ground!" echoed off the walls. Jeff's eyes darted around the large, open space. The warehouse was filled with crates and stacks of pallets, creating a maze of shadows and hiding spots. In the distance, he saw figures scrambling to flee, some running toward the back exits, others diving behind cover. Kane stayed close to him as they moved deeper into the warehouse, clearing each section methodically. The air was thick with dust and the acrid smell of sweat and fear. Jeff's ears rang from the commotion, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. Suddenly, a cry pierced the chaos, a child's voice, high-pitched and terrified. Jeff's heart leapt into his throat. Without thinking, he sprinted toward the sound, weaving between crates and dodging debris. "I've got a kid!" he shouted into his radio. "North side of the warehouse." He rounded a corner and saw her, a little girl no older than 6, huddled behind a stack of crates. Her tear-streaked face glistened in the flashlight beam, and her tiny body shook violently as she cried. "It's okay," Jeff said, dropping to his knees in front of her. "I'm here to help." She backed away, her eyes wide with terror. "No, no, don't take me back." Jeff's chest tightened. "I'm not taking you back," he promised. "I'm taking you somewhere safe. I'm taking you home." Behind him, he heard footsteps approaching, and he turned to see Kane covering him, her weapon raised. "We're clear," she said. Jeff reached for the girl slowly, his voice gentle. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Emily," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Emily," Jeff repeated, his heart breaking. "I'm going to carry you out of here, okay? You don't have to be scared anymore." She hesitated, then nodded, her small arms wrapping around his neck as he lifted her into his arms. Her tiny body was cold, and she clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a world of chaos. As they made their way back toward the exit, Jeff could hear the sound of handcuffs clicking, officers shouting orders, and suspects being dragged to the ground. But all of that faded into the background as he focused on the girl in his arms. Outside, the night air hit them like a wave, cold but refreshing. Paramedics rushed forward, but Emily refused to let go of Jeff. He sat down on the back of the ambulance, cradling her as she cried into his shoulder. "It's over now," he whispered, stroking her hair. "You're safe." Kane appeared beside him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. "We got Dante," she said. He tried to slip out through a back exit, but Team C caught him. Jeff exhaled, relief washing over him like a flood. "And the kids?" Kane's lips curved into a small smile. "We found them, all of them." Jeff closed his eyes, a wave of emotion crashing over him. For the first time since this nightmare began, he allowed himself to believe that they were winning. Emily stirred in his arms, her sobs quieting. She looked up at him, her tear-streaked face searching his for reassurance. "You promise they won't take me again?" Jeff's throat tightened, but he didn't hesitate. "I promise," as the flashing lights of the police cars illuminated the dark night. Jeff knew the battle wasn't over, but tonight they had won a victory that mattered, and he wasn't going to stop fighting until the war was over. The morning sun was barely visible through the gray haze of fog that hung over the city, casting a muted glow across the parking lot outside the police station. Jeff leaned against the hood of his truck, nursing a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. His eyes were bloodshot, and the exhaustion weighing down his body felt heavier than any load he'd hauled in his years as a truck driver. But despite the fatigue, there was a flicker of relief inside him. Small, but steady. The raid on the warehouse had been a success. Dante was in custody, the kids were safe, and for the first time in days, it felt like the pieces of this nightmare were finally falling into place. The door to the station opened, and Kane stepped out, her breath fogging in the chilly air. She approached Jeff with a folder tucked under her arm, her expression a mix of satisfaction and weariness. "Good news," she said, handing him the folder. "We've got enough evidence to link Dante to the larger trafficking network. The laptop we found in the warehouse had detailed transaction records. Names, dates, payments, it's all there." Jeff opened the folder and scanned the pages, his fingers trembling slightly. Each line of text represented a nightmare for someone. A child taken, a family destroyed. But now, it also represented something else. Justice. "How many names are on this list?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Kane exhaled deeply. "Too many. But with this information, the feds are stepping in. They're coordinating with multiple states to shut down every location connected to Dante." Jeff closed the folder and looked up at Kane. "Does this mean it's over?" Kane shook her head. "Not yet, but it's a big step in the right direction." Jeff nodded, the weight on his chest lifting slightly. "What about the kids we rescued? Are they okay?" "They're being taken care of," Kane assured him. "Emily and the others were transferred to a safe house last night. They're receiving medical attention and counseling. Lily's doing well too. Her mom hasn't left her side since they reunited." A small smile tugged at the corner of Jeff's lips. "That's good to hear." Kane studied him for a moment, her brow furrowed. "You haven't taken a break, have you?" Jeff chuckled softly. "Not really. Haven't been able to turn my brain off." She sighed and crossed her arms. "You've done more than most people would, Jeff. But you've got to take care of yourself too. These kids are safe because of you. You can rest now." Jeff stared out at the street, watching cars pass by in the distance. Rest. The word sounded foreign, almost impossible. But he knew she was right. The fight wasn't over. But for now, they'd won an important battle. "I'll rest soon," he said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. Kane didn't push him further. Instead, she pulled out her phone and scrolled through a few messages. "The feds want to question Dante this afternoon. They're hoping to get information on the remaining leaders of the network. If he cooperates, we could be looking at the beginning of the end for this operation." Jeff's jaw tightened. "And if he doesn't cooperate?" Kane's gaze hardened. "Then we'll find another way." A few hours later, Jeff stood outside the interrogation room, staring through the one-way mirror, at the man who had haunted his thoughts since the night before. Dante sat at the table, his hands cuffed in front of him, his face bruised from the struggle during the raid. Despite his situation, there was a calm arrogance about him, like he still believed he was in control. Jeff's fists clenched at his sides. He wanted to be the one sitting across from Dante, demanding answers. He wanted to know how a man could look into the eyes of a child and see them as nothing more than a transaction. But Kane had been clear. This was a federal investigation now, and they had their own team of interrogators. Jeff was supposed to stay on the sidelines, but the fire in his chest wouldn't let him leave. The door to the viewing room opened and Kane stepped in. "Still watching him?" Jeff nodded, his eyes never leaving Dante. "He doesn't look worried." Kane crossed her arms. "He thinks he's untouchable. Guys like him always do. But he doesn't know what we have on him yet. Once we show him the evidence, he'll realize the game's over." Jeff shook his head. "He's not the type to fold easily." "Maybe not," Kane said. "But we don't need him to give us much. Just enough to connect the dots and bring down the rest of the network." As they watched, one of the federal agents entered the interrogation room and set a thick stack of files on the table in front of Dante. The sound of the papers hitting the metal echoed through the speakers in the viewing room. The agent leaned forward, his tone calm but authoritative. "We have everything, Dante. Every deal you made, every name you took money from, every child you trafficked. You can either cooperate and help us take down the others, or you can rot in a cell while we do it without you." Dante smirked, leaning back in his chair. "You don't scare me." The agent smiled faintly. "You don't have to be scared, but you should be smart." Jeff watched as the exchange continued, frustration simmering beneath the surface. Dante wasn't giving anything away. At least not yet. But Jeff knew that with enough pressure, even the most stubborn men cracked. Kane touched his arm gently. "We'll get what we need. Don't let him get in your head." Jeff exhaled, the tension slowly leaving his body. "I just want this to be over. I want these kids to have a chance at a normal life." "They will," Kane said. "Because of you." That evening, Jeff sat in a small diner on the outskirts of town, a plate of half-eaten pancakes in front of him. The place was quiet, with only a few other patrons scattered around the booths. The smell of coffee and frying bacon filled the air. But Jeff wasn't hungry. He pushed the food around with his fork, lost in thought. The sound of the bell above the door jolted him back to reality, and he looked up to see Kane walking in. She spotted him immediately and slid into the booth across from him. "Didn't expect to see you here," she said, removing her coat and setting it on the seat beside her. Jeff shrugged. "Didn't know where else to go." She signaled to the waitress for a coffee and then turned her attention back to Jeff. "Dante finally cracked," she said. "Gave us the names of 2 more major players in the network. The feds are already planning the next raid." Jeff's shoulders relaxed slightly. "That's good." Kane nodded, sipping her coffee when it arrived. "It's more than good. It's the beginning of the end." Jeff stared out the window, watching the snow fall gently against the glass. For the first time in days, the weight on his chest felt lighter. "What are you going to do now?" Kane asked softly. Jeff thought about it for a moment. "I don't know. Maybe take a break, maybe get back on the road, but whatever I do, I'm not walking away from this completely. If there's any way I can help other kids like Lily, I'll do it." Kane smiled. "I had a feeling you'd say that." Jeff chuckled softly, the sound surprising even himself. "Guess I'm not the type to let things go." "No, you're not," Kane said warmly. "And that's exactly why you made a difference." As they sat in the quiet diner, the world outside felt a little less dark. There was still work to be done, but for the first time in a long while, Jeff allowed himself to breathe. And for tonight, that was enough. The hum of Jeff's truck engine was the only sound as he cruised down the nearly empty highway, the yellow lines blurring beneath him. Snowflakes swirled in the headlights, illuminated briefly before fading into the darkness. The radio was off, his phone silent, but Jeff didn't mind the quiet. After everything he'd been through in the past few days, the stillness was a welcome change. But as much as he tried to focus on the road, his mind kept drifting back to the kids. Lily, Ava, Aaron, Sophie, Ben, and now Emily. Each of their faces haunted him, their fear and tears etched into his memory like scars. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, willing the images to fade. The past few days had been a whirlwind. After Dante had cracked and given up the names of 2 key players in the trafficking ring, the feds had launched raids in multiple states. Jeff had been briefed on the progress earlier that morning. Several arrests had been made, and more children had been rescued. It was a victory, a big one. But why didn't it feel like enough? The road stretched out endlessly in front of him, but Jeff knew exactly where he was going. He had left the police station earlier that evening after saying goodbye to Kane, and now, with nothing but the open highway ahead, he was on his way to the safe house where the kids were staying. He needed to see them, not just to make sure they were okay, but for himself, to remind himself why this fight mattered. The safe house was tucked away at the end of a long, winding road, surrounded by tall trees and silence. The large, 2-story building looked more like a cozy lodge than a facility for recovering victims. The porch lights glowed warmly, casting a soft halo over the snow-covered front yard. Jeff parked his truck and sat there for a moment, staring at the house. His breath fogged the windshield as he exhaled slowly, gathering his thoughts. Was this the right thing to do? Would seeing him again help the kids, or would it just bring back memories they were trying to forget? Before he could overthink it, the front door opened, and a familiar face stepped out. A woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor smiled warmly as she waved him over. "Jeff Reynolds," she said, her breath visible in the cold air. "I was wondering when you'd show up." "Hey, Maggie," Jeff said, stepping onto the porch and shaking the snow from his boots. He'd met Maggie during the initial briefing about the safe house. She was the director of the facility and had dedicated her life to helping survivors of trafficking rebuild their lives. "Come on in," she said, holding the door open. "I just made a pot of coffee." Jeff followed her inside, the warmth of the house wrapping around him like a blanket. The scent of fresh coffee and baked goods filled the air, and soft music played in the background. The living room was cozy, with a crackling fireplace and a large Christmas tree in the corner, its lights twinkling softly. "You've got the place looking festive," Jeff said, nodding toward the tree. Maggie smiled. "The kids helped decorate it yesterday. It was the first time I saw them genuinely smile since they got here." Jeff's heart swelled at the thought. "How are they doing?" Maggie led him into the kitchen, where she poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one to him. "Better," she said. "Lily and her mom are inseparable. Ava's been opening up during therapy sessions, and Aaron's starting to trust the staff. Sophie and Ben are still quiet, but they're safe, and that's what matters." Jeff took a sip of the coffee, its warmth spreading through him. "And Emily?" "She's struggling," Maggie admitted, her expression softening. "But she's resilient. I think seeing you would help." Jeff's throat tightened. "Can I see her?" Maggie nodded. "She's in the playroom with the others." The playroom was at the back of the house, filled with shelves of toys, books, and stuffed animals. The soft hum of laughter and quiet conversation drifted through the partially open door, and Jeff paused for a moment, listening. He peeked inside and saw them. Lily sitting on the floor with her mom, flipping through a picture book. Ava and Sophie playing a board game. Ben building a tower out of wooden blocks, and Emily curled up in the corner with a stuffed bear, her fingers tracing patterns on its fur. Jeff's heart ached as he watched them. They looked like normal kids, but he knew the scars they carried ran deep. "Jeff!" Lily's voice broke through his thoughts, and she jumped to her feet, running over to him with a beaming smile. She wrapped her arms around his waist, and he knelt down, hugging her tightly. "Hey, kiddo," he said, his voice warm. "How are you?" "I'm good," Lily said, pulling back to look at him. "Mom says we're going to a new home soon, somewhere safe." "That's great news," Jeff said, ruffling her hair. "You deserve it." Ava and Sophie waved from the table, and Jeff waved back, but his eyes were drawn to Emily, who was still sitting quietly in the corner. She hadn't moved, but her eyes were on him, wide and filled with uncertainty. Jeff gave Lily's shoulder a gentle squeeze before making his way over to Emily. He sat down on the floor beside her, giving her space but close enough to show her he was there. "Hi, Emily," he said softly. "Do you remember me?" She nodded, hugging the stuffed bear tighter. "I wanted to see how you were doing," Jeff said, keeping his voice gentle. "I've been thinking about you a lot." Emily's eyes welled with tears, and she sniffled quietly. "Are the bad guys gone?" Jeff's throat tightened, but he smiled reassuringly. "Yeah, they're gone. They can't hurt you anymore." Emily hesitated, then scooted closer to him, resting her head against his arm. Jeff's heart broke all over again as he wrapped his arm around her, holding her gently. "Do you promise?" she whispered. "I promise," Jeff said, his voice firm. "You're safe now, and you'll never be alone again." Emily sniffled again, her tiny hand clutching his jacket. "Will you visit us again?" Jeff blinked back tears. "As many times as you want." Later that night, as Jeff drove back toward the city, the stars sparkled above him, their light cutting through the darkness. For the first time in what felt like forever, he didn't feel weighed down by guilt or fear. The road ahead was long, and the fight wasn't over. But tonight he knew he'd made a difference, and that was enough to keep him going. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly as Jeff walked down the long corridor of the federal building. His footsteps echoed off the marble floor, his boots slightly scuffed from the miles of road he'd traveled. The sterile smell of coffee and disinfectant filled the air, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the safe house he'd left behind only a few hours earlier. Today wasn't about kids, not directly at least. Today was about finishing what they started. He adjusted the collar of his jacket and took a deep breath before stepping into the large conference room at the end of the hall. Kane was already there, leaning over a table cluttered with maps, photographs, and stacks of evidence. She looked up as he entered, her expression softening. "You're early," she said, setting down the file she'd been reading. Jeff shrugged. Didn't feel like waiting. She gestured to the chair next to her and he sat down. "What's the update?" Kane flipped open one of the folders, revealing a photograph of a man with slicked back hair and a cruel smirk. Dante's testimony gave us a direct link to two major players in the network, Vincent Martel and Claudia Reyes. They're responsible for recruiting kids and managing transport across several states. Jeff leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he studied the photos. "Do we know where they are?" Kane nodded. "We've tracked Martel to a warehouse just outside the city, similar to the one we raided before. As for Claudia Reyes, she's been staying in a luxury condo downtown. She's the brains behind the operation, but Martel's the one who gets his hands dirty." Jeff's jaw tightened. "So we take him out first?" "Exactly," Kane said. "If we take Martel down, it'll cut off their ability to move kids quickly. Without him, Reyes will be stuck, and that's when we'll make our move on her." Jeff exhaled slowly, his mind already racing through scenarios. "What's the plan for tonight?" Kane tapped the map spread out on the table. "We're hitting the warehouse at midnight. SWAT will take the lead, but I want you there too. You've been instrumental in helping us figure out how these people operate, and your instincts have been spot on." Jeff nodded, his gaze locked on the map. "What do we know about the warehouse? Could there be more kids inside?" "Possibly," Kane admitted. "But we're prepared for that. Medical teams will be on standby just like before. If there are kids, we'll get them out safely." Jeff leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his face. "This feels bigger than the last raid." "It is," Kane said. "This could be the one that finally cripples their entire network." Jeff clenched his fists, determination flooding through him. "Then let's make sure we don't miss." By the time they reached the warehouse on the outskirts of the city, the night sky had turned pitch black, with only the distant glow of streetlights breaking through the darkness. Snow crunched beneath their boots as Jeff followed Kane and the SWAT team toward the building, their breath visible in the cold air. The warehouse was larger than the last one, its metal walls covered in rust and graffiti. The windows were boarded up, and the faint hum of machinery could be heard from inside. Jeff's pulse quickened as he scanned the perimeter, looking for any signs of movement. Kane crouched beside him, her voice low. "SWAT is breaching the east entrance. We'll enter from the loading dock on the west side." Jeff nodded, gripping the flashlight in his hand. "Let's do this." The team moved in silence, their footsteps muffled by the snow. When they reached the loading dock, one of the officers used a crowbar to pry open the door, and they slipped inside, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The air inside was damp and smelled of oil and metal. Rows of crates and pallets created a maze-like layout, and the sound of machinery grew louder as they moved deeper into the building. Kane signaled for them to split up, and Jeff took the left aisle, his flashlight sweeping over the stacks of boxes. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat a reminder of the stakes. Somewhere in this building, Martel was waiting, and Jeff wasn't leaving without him. A sudden noise made him freeze. Footsteps, heavy and hurried, coming from the far end of the warehouse. Jeff pressed his back against a crate and listened, his breath shallow. The footsteps grew louder, and then he saw him, Vincent Martel, sprinting toward a side exit with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. "Martel's on the move," Jeff shouted into his radio before taking off after him. Martel glanced over his shoulder, his eyes widening when he saw Jeff closing in. He knocked over a stack of crates, trying to slow him down, but Jeff vaulted over them, adrenaline surging through his veins. The exit door burst open, and Martel ran outside into the snow-covered yard. Jeff followed, his boots slipping slightly on the icy ground. The cold air burned his lungs, but he didn't stop. He could hear Martel's ragged breathing ahead of him, getting closer with every step. With a final burst of speed, Jeff lunged forward and tackled Martel to the ground. The duffel bag spilled open, cash and documents scattering across the snow. Martel struggled beneath him, throwing punches and curses, but Jeff held him down, pinning his arms behind his back. "You're done," Jeff growled, his breath fogging in the frigid air. Seconds later, Kane and 2 SWAT officers arrived, their weapons drawn. They cuffed Martel and hauled him to his feet, dragging him back toward the warehouse. Jeff stood there for a moment, catching his breath as he watched them go. His heart pounded, not from the chase but from the realization that they had just caught one of the key players in the trafficking ring. As he knelt down to gather the scattered documents, his flashlight illuminated a file marked with names and photographs. His stomach churned as he flipped through it. More kids, more lives shattered by the network they were trying to destroy. But now, with Martel in custody, they had a chance to save them. Kane returned, crouching beside him. "You okay?" Jeff nodded, though his mind was racing. "Yeah, just trying to process everything." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did good, Jeff. We've got him, and with these documents, Reyes won't have anywhere to hide." Jeff exhaled, the tension slowly leaving his body. "What happens next?" "We'll hit Reyes's condo first thing in the morning," Kane said. "She's the last piece of the puzzle." Jeff stared at the file in his hands, his fingers tracing the names. "Let's make sure this is the last time we see a list like this." Kane nodded, determination flashing in her eyes. "We will." As they walked back toward the warehouse, the snow continued to fall, covering the ground like a fresh start. Jeff knew the road ahead would still be long, but for the first time he felt like they were on the verge of something bigger, something final. And he wasn't going to stop until it was over. The cold air of the early morning clung to Jeff's skin as he stood outside the luxury condo building, staring up at its sleek glass windows reflecting the pale glow of dawn. The air smelled faintly of exhaust and wet pavement, and the quiet hum of the city waking up filled the streets around them. This wasn't the kind of place he expected someone like Claudia Reyes to be hiding, too exposed, too polished. But maybe that's what made her untouchable for so long. "She's on the top floor," Kane said, standing beside him as she zipped up her tactical jacket. Her breath formed small clouds in the cold. "We've got teams covering the exits and stairwells. No way she's slipping out." Jeff tightened the straps on his bulletproof vest and adjusted the earpiece in his ear. His adrenaline was already kicking in, making him hyper-aware of the slightest movements around him. The rustling of leaves, the distant honk of a car horn. He nodded to Kane, silently signaling that he was ready. A voice crackled through Kane's radio. "Team A in position, ready when you are." She pressed the button to respond. "Copy that. Move in on my signal." Jeff exhaled slowly, trying to keep himself grounded. The weight of what they were about to do wasn't lost on him. Claudia Reyes wasn't just another cog in the trafficking machine. She was a key player, one of the masterminds responsible for orchestrating the transport and sale of countless children. This was the moment they'd been working toward. Kane gave the signal, and the team moved toward the building entrance. They entered quickly, taking the elevator to the top floor while another team covered the stairwell. Jeff's pulse pounded in his ears as they ascended, the walls of the elevator feeling smaller with each passing second. When the elevator dinged and the doors slid open, they were met with a long hallway lined with sleek wooden floors and modern decor. The luxury of the place felt obscene, knowing it had been paid for with the suffering of others. They approached the door to Claudia's penthouse, and Kane signaled for one of the officers to breach it. The officer placed a small explosive charge on the lock, and after a brief countdown, the door burst open with a deafening boom. Jeff followed Kane inside, his flashlight cutting through the dimly lit space. The living room was large and open, with floor-to-ceiling windows that provided a panoramic view of the city. The furniture was modern and expensive, but the place had a sterile, unlived-in feel, as if it were more of a hiding spot than a home. "Clear," one of the officers called from the kitchen. "Hallway clear," another voice said. Jeff's eyes scanned the room, searching for any sign of movement. His instincts told him Claudia was still here. She wouldn't have had time to run. He followed Kane down the hallway, past several closed doors, until they reached the master bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and Kane pushed it open with the barrel of her gun. Inside, Claudia Reyes was standing by the window, her back to them, dressed in a silk robe. Her dark hair fell in waves down her back. And in the reflection of the glass, Jeff could see the faintest smirk on her face. "Well," she said, her voice calm and cool, "I was wondering how long it would take you to find me." "Hands where we can see them, Claudia," Kane said, stepping into the room with her weapon raised. Claudia turned slowly, raising her hands just enough to comply but not enough to seem submissive. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, like she was already thinking 3 steps ahead. "You're making a mistake," she said, her tone dripping with false politeness. "I have powerful friends." "Not powerful enough," Jeff said, stepping forward. His voice was cold, his gaze locked on her. "We've got everything we need to bring you down. Names, financial records, witness statements. This ends today." Claudia's smirk didn't falter. "You think cutting off one branch will kill the tree? You have no idea how deep this goes." "Then start talking," Kane said. "Or we'll dig up the roots ourselves." Claudia sighed, as if they were inconveniencing her, and took a step back toward the window. "I'm not the villain you think I am," she said, her voice softening. "I provide a service. I give people what they want. If it weren't me, someone else would be doing it." Jeff's fists clenched at his sides. "You're justifying selling kids like products?" "I'm being realistic," Claudia said, tilting her head slightly. "The world is ugly, Mr. Reynolds. I didn't create that ugliness. I just profit from it." "Not anymore," Kane said, moving closer. "Turn around, hands behind your back." For a moment, Jeff thought Claudia would resist. But then she sighed and complied, turning around and placing her hands behind her back. Kane quickly cuffed her wrists and read her rights, but Claudia didn't seem fazed. As the officers led her out of the room, Jeff stayed behind, staring out the window at the city below. His reflection stared back at him, and for the first time in a while, he felt like he could breathe. The woman who had caused so much pain was finally in custody. Kane returned a moment later, standing beside him. "We did it," she said softly. Jeff nodded, but his mind was already moving forward. "What about the kids connected to her operation? Do we know where they are?" "Some of them," Kane said. "The documents we recovered last night will help us find the rest. It's going to take time, but we're not stopping until we get them all." Jeff exhaled, the weight on his chest easing slightly. "Good. You should be proud of what we've accomplished," Kane said, her voice gentle. "You've been at the heart of this since the beginning. You made a difference." Jeff rubbed the back of his neck, the tension slowly leaving his muscles. "I know, but there's still so much work to do." Kane placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll do it one step at a time." Jeff nodded, watching the sun rise higher over the city. The fight wasn't over, but this victory was one he could savor, for now. As they left the condo, Jeff felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The sky was a pale canvas of gray as Jeff sat on the hood of his truck, parked near the edge of a small rest area overlooking a frozen river. The cold breeze nipped at his face, but he barely noticed. His fingers traced the rim of his coffee cup, the warmth seeping into his hands as he stared at the icy waters below. The stillness of the morning should have been comforting, but his mind was restless. Claudia Reyes was behind bars. Vincent Martel had folded under the weight of the evidence. The network of traffickers had been dismantled, with major arrests happening across multiple states. By all accounts, it was over. The feds had told him as much when they shook his hand and thanked him for his help. But Jeff couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't. He thought about the kids, Lily, who had whispered those 4 words in his truck and set everything in motion. Ava, Aaron, Sophie, Ben, and Emily, all of them saved but still carrying the scars of what had been done to them. Would they ever truly heal? Would the nightmares ever stop? The sound of an approaching car pulled him from his thoughts. He turned to see Kane's SUV pulling into the lot, its tires crunching against the gravel. She stepped out, bundled in a thick coat, her breath fogging in the cold air as she walked over to him. "Didn't expect to find you here," she said, leaning against the truck beside him. "Thought you'd be on the road by now." Jeff shrugged, taking a sip of his coffee. "I tried, got about an hour out of town before I turned around." Kane smiled faintly. "Couldn't walk away?" "No," Jeff admitted, his voice soft. "I thought I could, but every mile I drove just made it harder. I kept thinking about the kids, wondering if they're okay." "They're in good hands," Kane said. "Maggie's team is doing everything they can to help them heal, and you gave them a fighting chance." Jeff nodded, but the weight in his chest didn't lift. "I know, but there's something about endings that don't feel final, you know." Kane sighed, folding her arms as she looked out over the frozen river. "It's not final, not for the kids and not for us, but that's the thing about fights like this. You don't win them all at once. It's a long process. You chip away at the darkness bit by bit, and eventually you make a difference." Jeff stared at the horizon, the rising sun casting a faint glow over the icy landscape. "I just wish it didn't feel so unfinished." Kane hesitated, then pulled a small folder from under her arm and handed it to him. "I thought you'd say that. That's why I brought this." Jeff opened the folder, his eyes scanning the papers inside. It was a list of names, kids who had been connected to Claudia Reyes's operation but hadn't been found during the raids. Some had been missing for years, their whereabouts unknown. "These are the ones we're still looking for," Kane said. "It's not a complete list, but it's a start." Jeff's breath hitched as he flipped through the pages. The faces of the missing kids stared back at him, some smiling, some serious, all of them frozen in time. His mind raced with possibilities. Could some of them still be out there, waiting to be found? "I thought you might want to help," Kane said, her voice gentle. "Off the books, no pressure, but I figured you'd want to see it through." Jeff closed the folder and looked at her, gratitude and determination shining in his eyes. "You know me too well." Kane smirked. "I had a feeling you weren't ready to walk away just yet." Jeff exhaled, the weight in his chest easing slightly. "Where do we start?" "Wherever you want," Kane said. "The feds have their hands full, and officially the case is considered wrapped up. But you and I both know there's always more to the story." Jeff nodded, a spark igniting inside him. The road ahead would be long, but he wasn't afraid of that. He'd spent most of his life on the road, and if that's where this fight took him, so be it. He stood up, tossing the empty coffee cup into a nearby trash bin. "Let's find them," he said, his voice steady. Kane smiled. "I'll make a few calls. We'll start with the last known locations and work our way out." As she headed back to her SUV, Jeff lingered by the river for a moment, the cold breeze brushing against his face. For the first time in days, he felt a sense of purpose that wasn't weighed down by guilt. The kids they'd saved were safe, and now it was time to save the ones who hadn't been found yet. With the folder tucked under his arm, he climbed into his truck and started the engine. The familiar hum filled the cab, and the vibrations under his seat grounded him. This wasn't just another trip. It was a mission. He pulled out of the rest area, the road stretching endlessly in front of him. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the air, but the horizon ahead seemed brighter, and this time, Jeff knew exactly where he was going. The sound of gravel crunching under Jeff's boots was the only noise as he walked toward the small farmhouse on the edge of a desolate road. The evening sun hung low, casting a golden light over the frost-covered fields that stretched endlessly in every direction. His breath fogged the air as he exhaled, his heartbeat steady despite the gravity of the moment. This was it, the last name on the list. In his hand, Jeff held a photograph of a boy named Ryan Torres, age 10, who had been missing for almost a year. His shy smile stared back at Jeff from the crinkled edges of the photo, the kind of smile that hinted at a boy who loved quiet moments and gentle adventures. The information they had was thin, but it had led them here, this quiet farmhouse far from the main roads, where an anonymous tip had suggested a child matching Ryan's description had been seen. Kane stepped out of the car behind him, her boots sinking slightly into the frost-covered ground. "You ready?" she asked, zipping up her jacket. Jeff nodded, his fingers tightening around the photograph. "As ready as I'll ever be." They approached the farmhouse cautiously, their breath the only sound against the quiet evening. The windows were dark, the curtains drawn, but a faint flicker of movement behind the fabric caught Jeff's attention. Someone was inside. Kane motioned to the side entrance, and they moved quietly along the porch, their footsteps careful and deliberate. When they reached the door, Kane tested the handle. It was unlocked. She glanced at Jeff, and he gave her a brief nod. With one swift motion, Kane pushed the door open, and they stepped inside, their flashlights illuminating the small kitchen. The air smelled of dust and damp wood, but there was another scent beneath it, something familiar and comforting. Soup, Jeff realized. Someone had been cooking. A chair scraped against the floor in the next room, followed by the sound of hurried footsteps. Jeff's pulse quickened as he followed the noise, his flashlight casting long shadows across the floor. They entered the living room, where a woman in her 50s stood near the doorway, her eyes wide with fear. "Don't move," Kane said, her voice firm but calm. The woman's hands trembled as she raised them. "Please, I didn't hurt him," she said quickly. "I was just keeping him safe." Jeff's heart pounded. Him. "Where is he?" Jeff asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman hesitated, glancing toward the hallway. "He's in the back room. Please, I didn't know what else to do. They told me if I let him go, they'd kill him." Jeff didn't wait for an explanation. He sprinted down the hallway, his boots echoing off the wooden floor. The door at the end of the hall was partially open, and he pushed it gently, the hinges creaking as it swung wide. There, sitting on a small bed with a tattered blanket wrapped around him, was Ryan Torres. The boy's eyes were wide and filled with fear, but as the flashlight beam landed on him, recognition flickered across his face. He hugged his knees to his chest, his small body trembling. "Ryan," Jeff said softly, stepping into the room and kneeling beside the bed. "My name's Jeff. I'm here to take you home." Ryan stared at him, tears brimming in his eyes. "Home?" he whispered, his voice cracking. Jeff nodded, his throat tightening. "Yeah, buddy, home, where you'll be safe." Ryan hesitated for a moment, then threw his arms around Jeff's neck, sobbing into his shoulder. Jeff held him tightly, his hand gently stroking the boy's hair. The weight of the past year seemed to crash down on both of them in that moment. Ryan's fear, Jeff's guilt, and the overwhelming relief of finally finding him. "You're okay now," Jeff whispered. "I've got you." Behind him, Kane appeared in the doorway, her eyes soft as she took in the scene. "Paramedics are on their way," she said quietly. "Let's get him out of here." Jeff stood, lifting Ryan into his arms. The boy clung to him like a lifeline, his fingers gripping Jeff's jacket as if he were afraid to let go. As they made their way back through the farmhouse, the woman stood silently in the kitchen, tears streaming down her face. "I never wanted to hurt him," she said softly. "I just didn't know how to get away from them." Kane didn't respond immediately. Instead, she handed the woman a card. "Call this number," she said. "They can help you." The woman nodded, her hands trembling as she took the card. Outside, the cool evening air hit Jeff's face as he carried Ryan toward the waiting ambulance. The flashing lights illuminated the quiet landscape, casting long shadows across the ground. Jeff carefully placed Ryan on the stretcher. But the boy didn't release his grip on Jeff's hand. "It's okay," Jeff said gently. "I'm not going anywhere." The paramedic smiled warmly. "You can ride with us," she said. Jeff climbed into the back of the ambulance and sat beside Ryan, their hands still intertwined. As the doors closed and the vehicle began to move, Jeff leaned back, his mind racing with everything that had brought them to this moment. Kane followed in her car, her radio crackling with updates from the station. By the time they reached the hospital, the stars had begun to appear in the sky, twinkling like distant promises of hope. Inside the hospital, doctors and nurses moved quickly, examining Ryan and running tests. Jeff paced the hallway, unable to sit still. The tension that had been holding him together for days was finally unraveling, and he wasn't sure how to process it. Kane approached him, a cup of coffee in hand. "You did it," she said softly. Jeff shook his head. "We did it. I couldn't have done this without you." She smiled and leaned against the wall. "What happens now?" Jeff exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Ryan gets to go home. His parents are on their way." "And you?" Jeff thought about it for a moment. "I think it's time I get back on the road. But not the way I used to." He looked at her, determination in his eyes. "I'm going to keep looking for the ones we haven't found yet. The ones who didn't make it onto any lists. Someone has to." Kane nodded, understanding. "You'll always have backup. You know that, right?" Jeff smiled faintly. "I know." Just then, the door to Ryan's room opened and a nurse stepped out. "He's asking for you," she said. Jeff entered the room quietly, his heart swelling as he saw Ryan sitting up in bed, a stuffed bear clutched in his arms. The boy's face lit up when he saw Jeff. "Are you staying?" Ryan asked, his voice small. Jeff sat beside him and ruffled his hair. "I'm staying as long as you need me, buddy." Ryan smiled, and for the first time since Jeff had found him, the fear in the boy's eyes seemed to fade. As Jeff sat there holding Ryan's hand, he realized something. The weight he had been carrying wasn't a burden, it was purpose. And for the first